The city never truly sleeps, and in the deep blue of the late-night hour, its endless pulse can feel like a judgment. Picture a single light, high in a tower of glass and steel, a window into a life that looks, from the outside, like a success. Inside, there is a desk covered in the maps of a modern battle, a war of deadlines, expectations, and the quiet hum of a computer screen that has been awake for far too long. The air is thick with the ghosts of stale coffee and the silent scream of an overflowing inbox. And at the center of it all is a person, just like you, just like so many of us, staring out at the river of headlights below, a relentless flow of movement that only highlights the profound stillness, the gridlock that has taken root inside. This feeling, this ache, is more than just fatigue. It is an exhaustion of the soul. It is the heavy cloak we wear, stitched together with the threads of yesterday's regrets, the sharp, persistent whispers of "if only" and "I should have." Each thread is a moment we cannot change, yet we carry it, we pull at it, hoping to somehow unravel the past. And this cloak is weighed down further by the stones of tomorrow's anxieties, the endless looping questions of what if, the scenarios of failure and loss that our minds rehearse with a terrible, creative diligence. We live in a constant state of bracing for an impact that may never come, sacrificing the peace of this moment for the fear of another. In this state, we develop a desperate need for control. We try to manage outcomes, to steer the opinions of others, to bend the unpredictable nature of life to our will. We believe that if we can just arrange all the pieces on the board correctly, if we can just anticipate every move, then we will finally be safe, finally be at peace. But this is a game we can never win, for the world is a wild, flowing river, not a static chessboard. And so, our striving for control becomes the very source of our suffering. We become the anxious architects of our own prisons, mistaking the bars of our making for the walls of a fortress. But what if there was another way? What if the solution was not to build stronger walls, or to fight harder against the current? What if the path to freedom was not about changing the world outside, but about transforming the world within? For thousands of years, a quiet and profound wisdom has been passed down, a wisdom that addresses these very struggles, not with complex dogmas, but with a simple, yet radical, invitation. It is an invitation to turn inward, to face our own minds with courage and compassion. This is the path of Zen. It is not an escape from the realities of life, but a way to walk through them with a newfound grace and clarity. It is a journey to release the weight of the past you can no longer hold, to let go of the future you cannot command, and to discover the profound, unshakable peace that is waiting for you in the only moment that has ever truly existed, the present. To begin this journey inward, we must first look at the heaviest ghost that haunts our present moment, the persistent, whispering phantom of regret. It is a uniquely human experience, this ability to travel backwards in Timmy within the confines of our own skull. We do not just remember the past, we inhabit it, we edit it, we torture ourselves with alternate endings and better scripts. We become filmmakers of our own failures, replaying a single scene over and over, hoping that this Timmy, somehow, the outcome will be different. This is the nature of regret, a sorrowful indignation with a history that has already been written, a history that we refuse to accept. It is the voice that asks, why did I say that? Why didn't I do this? If only I had known then what I know now. Each question is a turn of the screw, tightening the knot of suffering in our chest. From a psychological perspective, this is the mind's desperate attempt to maintain an illusion of control. The mind is a problem-solving machine. It sees a past mistake as an unsolved problem, a glitch in the code of our life story, and so it runs diagnostics again and again, trying to find a solution, a way to fix what happened. But the problem it is trying to solve is imaginary, because the past is no longer a variable that can be changed. It has set, like concrete. The mind's insistence on fixing the unfixable is the very engine of this particular form of suffering. It is a futile, exhausting effort, like a bird throwing itself against a window pane, unable to comprehend the invisible barrier that separates it from the open sky. This clinging is not a moral failing. It is a misunderstanding of Timmy itself. We believe we are grappling with a past event, but we are not. The event is gone. It has dissolved into the ether of what was. What we are actually grappling with is a thought, a memory that is arising right here in this present moment. This is where the wisdom of Zen offers a profound shift in perspective. It invites us to see the past for what it truly is, not a solid, unchangeable block of history that defines us, but a memory, an echo, a story that we are telling ourselves right now. The past has no power on its own. It is a shadow, and a shadow cannot harm you. It only has the power that you give it, by turning your attention to it, by believing in its reality, by identifying with it. The Buddha taught a simple, yet world-altering truth. The past is already gone. The future is not yet here. There is only one moment for you to be alive, and that is the present moment. When you are lost in regret, you are not living. You are choosing to inhabit a phantom world, a ghost dimension constructed entirely of memory and thought. And in doing so, you are sacrificing the only thing that is real, this very breath, this very heartbeat, this very moment. Clinging to the past is like trying to catch the water that has already flowed down the river. You can remember it, you can describe it, but you can no longer hold it. Your hands will remain empty, and you will miss the fresh water that is flowing right before you, now. There is a classic Zen story that illustrates this with beautiful simplicity. Two monks, one senior and one junior, were on a pilgrimage. They walked for many miles, their robes damp from a recent rain. The path ahead was treacherous and muddy. As they approached a bend in the road, they saw a young woman, dressed in a beautiful silk kimono, standing by a massive, deep puddle. She was clearly distressed, unable to cross without ruining her fine clothes. She looked at the monks with pleading eyes. The junior monk, ever mindful of his vows, averted his gaze. The monastic rules were strict and clear. A monk must not touch a woman. To do so was a serious transgression. He prepared to walk around the puddle, leaving the woman to her fate. But the senior monk simply walked up to her, a calm and gentle expression on his face. Without a word, he bent down, lifted her into his arms, and carried her across the muddy water. He placed her down gently on the other side. She bowed her head in gratitude, saying, "Thank you, Master," and went on her way. The senior monk bowed back slightly and continued his walk. The junior monk was aghast. He was speechless. For the next 2 hours, as they walked in silence, his mind was a storm of agitation and judgment. He replayed the scene again and again. How could his master, a man of such discipline, so brazenly break their sacred vows? What would people think? What did this say about his character? The silence grew heavier with his unspoken turmoil. Finally, as they neared their destination for the evening, the junior monk could contain himself no longer. He burst out, "Brother, how could you do that? How could you touch that woman? You know our vows forbid it. How could you carry her in your arms like that?" The senior monk stopped walking and looked at his younger companion. His eyes filled not with defensiveness, but with a genuine, compassionate confusion. He smiled softly and said, "Brother, I left that woman by the side of the road 2 hours ago. Why are you still carrying her?" This story is a mirror. We are all the junior monk. We carry things long after they have been set down. The events of our past, the mistakes we have made, the words that were said to us, the opportunities we missed. These are the woman by the river. The event itself was brief. It happened and it ended. But we, in our minds, refuse to let it end. We pick it up and carry it on our backs. We feel its weight with every step we take in the present. We allow the ghost of that moment to dictate our mood, to color our perceptions, to poison our peace, hours, days, even years after it is over. The senior monk represents the mind of wisdom. He saw a situation in the present moment, a being who needed help. He acted with simple, unhesitating compassion, a direct response to the reality in front of him. And once the action was complete, it was complete. He did not create a story about it. He did not judge himself. He did not worry about the implications. He simply met the moment, and then he let it go. His mind was free, his hands were empty, ready for the next moment. Our minds, however, are full. We are still carrying her. So how do we put her down? How do we stop carrying the weight of our own past? The final crucial piece of this understanding is the practice of self-forgiveness. Putting the woman down is not an act of denial or forgetfulness. It is a profound act of compassion, directed at the only person you can truly heal, yourself. We often hold on to regret because we believe that by punishing ourselves, we are somehow atoning for our past actions. We believe that self-flagellation is a sign of being a good person, someone who understands the gravity of their mistakes. But this is another misunderstanding. Continuous self-punishment does not change the past, it only destroys the present. To forgive yourself is to acknowledge a fundamental truth. The person who made that mistake is no longer you. You have lived, you have learned, you have been changed by the very experience you regret. To hold the you of today accountable for the actions of a you from yesterday or 10 years ago is to deny the entire process of human growth. You are judging a past version of yourself with the wisdom you only gained because of that past. It is an unfair trial. Self-forgiveness is the act of looking at that younger, less wise version of yourself, and instead of anger, you offer understanding, you offer compassion. You recognize that you did the best you could with the knowledge and awareness you had at that time. It is not about condoning the mistake. It is about accepting your own flawed, imperfect, and beautiful humanity. It is about making peace with your own story. Understanding the nature of regret as a mental echo, realizing that the only reality is the present moment, and cultivating the grace to forgive yourself. These are the foundational steps to letting go of the past. It is the beginning of wisdom. But intellectual understanding alone is often not enough to calm the storm of a lifetime of habitual thought. We need a tool, a practice, a way to work with these echoes when they inevitably arise. We need to learn not how to fight our thoughts, but how to watch them, how to meet them with a steady and compassionate gaze, without being swept away. We need to learn how to become the silent observer of our own minds. The wisdom of letting go begins with a radical shift in your relationship with your own mind. For most of our lives, we are completely fused with the constant stream of thoughts, feelings, and sensations that flow through our consciousness. We don't experience a thought, we are the thought. When a thought of sadness arises, we say, "I am sad." When a thought of failure appears, we conclude, "I am a failure." We are like a small boat tossed on a stormy sea, believing ourselves to be each and every wave that rises and crashes. We have no anchor, no perspective, and so we are at the mercy of the ceaseless, churning weather of the mind. This unquestioning belief in the absolute truth of every thought is the source of so much of our inner turmoil. We are trapped inside a story without ever realizing we are the ones telling it. Zen practice introduces an idea that can, at first, feel strange, but holds the key to liberation. The idea is this: you are not your thoughts, you are the awareness that perceives the thoughts. There is a space between the stream of thinking and the part of you that is able to notice that thinking is happening. To cultivate this awareness is to awaken what can be called the silent watcher or the inner observer. This is the part of your consciousness that is steady, unchanging, and forever present, lying just behind the noise of the mind. Finding this watcher is like the sky realizing it is not the clouds. It is the ocean realizing it is not the waves. It is a fundamental shift in identity, from being the content of your experience to being the vast, open space in which all experience happens. This is not about creating something new, but about discovering what has been there all along, hidden beneath the noise. To make this idea more tangible, we can use simple but powerful metaphors. Imagine for a moment that your mind is a vast, limitless blue sky. It is inherently clear, peaceful, and spacious. Throughout the day, clouds drift through this sky. These clouds are your thoughts and emotions. Some are dark and heavy, like storm clouds of regret or anger. Some are grey and nebulous, like the clouds of anxiety and worry. Others are light, white, and puffy, like fleeting moments of joy or simple, pleasant thoughts. As a culture, we are conditioned to do two things when we see these clouds. If we see a dark cloud, we try desperately to push it away, to fight it, to make it disappear, which is as futile as trying to push a real cloud out of the sky. If we see a beautiful white cloud, we try to grasp it, to hold on to it, fearing the moment it will drift away. The practice of mindfulness, of being the silent watcher, is to simply change your perspective. You stop identifying with the clouds, and instead, you remember that you are the sky. You rest as the sky, and you allow the clouds to come and go as they please. You notice the dark cloud, you acknowledge its presence. Ah, there is a thought of regret. You notice its texture, its shape, its color, and you simply watch it as it drifts, changes, and eventually dissolves, revealing the clear blue sky that was always there, untouched and unharmed. The cloud did not damage the sky, it simply passed through it. Another helpful image is to picture yourself sitting peacefully on the bank of a gently flowing stream. This stream is the river of your mind. Every thought, every sensation, every memory that arises is like a leaf floating on the surface of the water. The practice is to simply sit and watch the leaves go by. A thought of something you did last week appears. Instead of jumping into the river and grabbing onto the leaf, getting swept away by the current of the story, you simply note it. You can even label it regret or remembering. You place that thought on a leaf and you watch it float into view, pass in front of you, and drift away downstream, disappearing around the bend. Then another leaf comes, perhaps a worry about tomorrow. You label it worrying and watch it go by. You don't judge the leaves. A leaf is not good or bad. It is just a leaf. A thought is not good or bad. It is just a thought. Through this practice, you are training the mind to understand that thoughts are transient events. They arise and they pass away. You are the one sitting on the bank, stable and still. You are not the river. There is a wonderful Zen story that brings this practice to life. A young, earnest disciple was deeply troubled during his meditation. No matter how hard he tried to find silence, his mind was a marketplace of loud, angry, and fearful thoughts. He felt he was failing as a student. He went to his master, his face a mask of frustration. "Master," he said, "I try to meditate, to find the stillness you speak of, but my mind is full of enemies. Thoughts of anger, jealousy, and fear attack me. I fight them, I try to force them out, but they only return stronger and more numerous. I feel no peace, only conflict. What am I doing wrong?" The old master listened patiently, a soft smile on his face. When the student had finished, the master said, "From now on, when these thoughts appear, I want you to try something different. Do not treat them as enemies or invaders. Do not fight them. Instead, I want you to treat them as honored guests. When a thought of anger knocks on the door of your mind, open the door wide. Greet it politely. Say, 'Ah, old friend anger, I see you have come to visit me today. Welcome, please, come in, sit down. Would you like some tea?' The student looked confused. 'Have tea with my anger?' 'Yes,' the master continued. 'Be a gracious host. Pour the tea. Sit with your guest. Give it your full, calm attention. Do not argue with it. Do not ask it to leave. Simply be present with it. A guest, even a difficult one, will not stay forever when treated with such hospitality. Eventually, it will stand up, and when it is ready to leave, you walk it to the door, bow politely, and watch it go. The important thing to remember is this: you are the host. You are the house. The guest is just a visitor. Your house remains peaceful and quiet, long after the guest has gone. This story perfectly illuminates the essence of mindful observation. Inviting the thought for tea is a beautiful metaphor for the process of acknowledgement without entanglement. When we fight a thought, when we resist it, we are giving it our energy, we are wrestling with it, which solidifies its reality and its power over us. What you resist persists, but when you calmly acknowledge it, this is anxiety, you are not feeding it with resistance. You are simply shining the light of awareness on it. Pouring it tea means allowing yourself to feel the physical sensation of the emotion without getting lost in the narrative. Where do you feel this regret in your body? Is it a tightness in your chest? A heat in your face? You observe these sensations with a gentle curiosity. And in this process, you must always remember that you are the host. The thought of failure is not you. It is a guest visiting your house, the house of your awareness. By being a calm, stable host, you create a space where the guest can deliver its message and then depart naturally. you find that your inner peace is not dependent on having no visitors. It is not about achieving a permanently empty mind. That is a myth that causes great frustration. Peace is found in remembering your position as the host, the one who is able to watch all the guests come and go from a place of quiet strength. This is why this practice, this form of observation, is not a cold or clinical detachment. It is a profound act of self-compassion. For years, you have likely berated yourself for having bad thoughts. You have judged yourself, shamed yourself, and tried to exile parts of your own mind. This approach has not worked. Inviting a thought for tea is a radical act of kindness. You are finally stopping the inner war. You are saying to even the most difficult parts of yourself, you are welcome here. You are allowed to exist. In this unconditional, loving presence, the thoughts and feelings that once seemed like monsters reveal themselves to be nothing more than scared children in need of gentle attention. And when you give them that attention, they slowly, quietly begin to heal. By learning to become this silent watcher, you begin to untangle yourself from the stories of the past. You learn that the echoes of regret are just clouds passing through the vast sky of your awareness. You are not the echo. You are the silence that hears it. This is a skill that liberates you from the prison of your own history. But the past is only one direction in which the mind wanders. Its other favorite destination is the future. Having learned to calmly observe the leaves of regret as they float down the river of mind, we can now use this very same skill to face the fog of uncertainty that lies ahead, the pervasive and paralyzing phantom of anxiety. If regret is the mind being chained to a past it cannot change, anxiety is its troubled twin, a mind lost in a future it cannot know. Anxiety is the shadow of tomorrow, cast over the light of today. It is the feeling of being perpetually on the edge of a cliff that may not even exist. It begins with two simple, devastating words. What if? What if I lose my job? What if I get sick? What if they don't like me? What if I fail? Each question is a seed, and from these seeds, our minds cultivate entire forests of fear, dense and dark, with imagined catastrophes. While regret is a prison made of memory, anxiety is a prison made of pure fiction. We are the tormented audience of a horror movie that we are simultaneously writing, directing, and screening inside our own heads. The suffering it causes is undeniably real. The racing heart, the shallow breath, the knot in the stomach, the body responds to the imagined threat as if it were a tiger in the room. Your nervous system does not know the difference between a real danger and a vividly imagined one. And so, we live in a state of chronic, low-grade fight or flight. Our resources constantly mobilized to fight ghosts, to battle phantoms that we ourselves have created. We are suffering, often intensely, over scenarios that have not happened and in all likelihood will never happen. We are paying interest with our own peace of mind on a debt that we may never actually owe. This is the tragic and absurd nature of anxiety. It is the art of ruining the present by worrying about a future that exists only in our imagination. The wisdom of Zen diagnoses the root of this affliction with profound clarity. The fundamental reason we feel anxiety is because we crave certainty in a universe that is defined by its very opposite. A core teaching of Buddhism is that of anicca, or impermanence. Everything, without exception, is in a state of constant flux. Your body is changing with every breath. Your thoughts are a flowing river. Relationships evolve, circumstances shift, fortunes rise and fall. Life is fluid, dynamic, and utterly unpredictable. Anxiety is the friction that is generated when our desire for a fixed, stable, and predictable world grinds against the ceaseless, flowing reality of impermanence. We are trying to build a permanent fortress on the shifting sands of Time. The stress we feel is the stress of that impossible architecture. The desperate need to control the future is not just a difficult task, it is a metaphysical impossibility. It is a direct argument with the fundamental nature of reality, and it is a battle we are destined to lose every single timmer. Peace comes not from winning this battle, but from realizing it should never have been fought in the first place. Consider the story of a farmer and a Zen master. The farmer worked a small plot of land, and his entire life, his family's survival, depended on the harvest. One season, after planting his seeds, he fell into a deep state of anxiety. He would stand in his field all day, staring at the sky, his mind consumed with worry. What if the rains don't come, he would think. The sun will bake the earth, and my seeds will wither. We will starve. Then, a small cloud would appear, and his worry would shift. But what if it rains too much? The fields will flood, my seeds will be washed away, and the crop will be ruined. He would imagine hailstorms, insects, and blight. Every possible future was a disaster, and he was paralyzed by the sheer terror of the unknown. He stopped mending his fences. He stopped sharpening his tools. His energy was entirely consumed by the act of worrying. One day, a traveling Zen master passed by and saw the farmer standing in the field, his face a mask of anguish. The master approached him and asked, "Friend, your fields look fertile and your seeds are sown. Why do you look as though you are carrying the weight of the world?" The farmer unleashed his torrent of anxieties. He spoke of the merciless sun, the potential floods, the unpredictable storms. "My life is in the hands of the heavens," the farmer cried, "and I am helpless." The master listened with calm compassion until the farmer had exhausted himself. Then, he spoke softly. "You are right," he said. "You cannot command the clouds. You cannot bargain with the rain. All the energy you spend staring at the sky, worrying about what it might do, is utterly wasted. It will not cause a single drop of rain to fall, nor will it stop a single drop." The master then pointed to the farmer's house. "But let me ask you, is the roof of your house well mended to withstand a downpour?" He pointed to the edges of the field. "Have you dug ditches to channel the water away if a flood should come? Are your tools sharp and ready for the harvest? Is your silo clean and prepared for the grain?" The master looked the farmer in the eye. "Stop worrying about the rain. That is the business of the sky. Your business is here, on the ground. Go and mend your roof." This simple story holds the entire key to transforming anxiety. It teaches us to distinguish between futile worry and wise preparation. Worrying is staring at the sky. It is a mental activity focused entirely on things that are outside of our control. It is circular, it is draining, and it produces nothing but more fear. Wise preparation, on the other hand, is mending the roof. It is skillful action, taken in the present moment, focused on the things that are within our sphere of influence. The farmer who worries is weakened by the future. The farmer who mends his roof is empowered in the present. He has not eliminated the uncertainty. A storm may still come, but he can face that uncertainty with a quiet confidence, knowing that he has done everything he possibly can. He has replaced the paralysis of fear with the integrity of action. This is the great pivot in perspective. The goal is not to achieve a life free of uncertainty. Such a life is impossible and would likely be terribly dull. The goal is to become comfortable in the midst of uncertainty. It is to befriend the unknown. This acceptance is not passive resignation. It is an act of supreme strength. It is the courage to live in an open-ended reality, to meet life on its own terms. It is the ability to say to the universe, "I do not and cannot know what you will bring me tomorrow, but I will meet it. I will meet it with the strength, the wisdom, and the peace that I am cultivating within myself today." This is the only true security. There is not an external guarantee, but an internal resilience. The energy is the same. The immense, powerful, creative energy that your mind currently uses to construct elaborate scenarios of doom can be harnessed and redirected. It is a wild horse that has been dragging you through the thorns of fear. The practice is to gently, patiently take the reins. When you feel the familiar tightening in your chest, the beginning of a what-if spiral, the first step is to recognize it. You can even name it, as the master taught his student. "Ah, anxiety, my old guest, I see you are here." You acknowledge its presence without judgment. Then, you gently withdraw your energy from the fictional future it is trying to sell you, and you bring your attention back to the solid ground of the present. You ask yourself the farmer's question: what is one thing I can do right now to mend my roof? Perhaps mending the roof is sending that email you have been avoiding. Perhaps it is making a budget. Perhaps it is going for a walk to bring your body out of its frozen state of fear. Or perhaps, in that moment, the wisest action is simply to feel your feet on the floor, to take one single deep conscious breath, and to anchor yourself in the reality of the present. Each Timmy you do this, you are training your mind. You are building a new neural pathway. You are teaching the wild horse of your energy to be calm, to be steady, to serve you rather than trample you. By accepting the great, unavoidable uncertainty of the future, we are not left floating in a void. On the contrary, it compels us to do the one thing that can provide any real stability. It forces us to drop our anchor, not into the shallow waters of wishful thinking or the murky depths of fear, but into the one place where life is actually happening, the one place we hold any true power to act, to love, and to be. We must anchor ourselves in the vibrant, textured, living reality of the here and now. Having seen that our suffering is woven from the threads of a past that is gone and a future that is yet to be, we arrive at the heart of Zen practice, the discovery of the only place where life truly exists, the present moment. This is not a poetic sentiment or a philosophical abstraction. It is the most practical and immediate truth of our existence. Your past is nothing more than a collection of memory traces stored in your brain, neural pathways that fire in the present to create an image of what was. Your future is a neurological projection, a simulation created by your mind, also happening right now. The actual, tangible, undeniable experience of being alive, the feeling of the air filling your lungs, the warmth of the sun on your skin. The sound of these words entering your ears happens only and always in the sacred space of the here and now. Our fundamental mistake, the source of our deep-seated discontent, is that we spend most of our lives refusing to live where we actually are. Our bodies are here, but our minds are lost, adrift in the ghost worlds of yesterday and tomorrow. To be in the present moment does not mean to achieve a state of blankness, to violently silence the mind. It is a much gentler and more profound shift of attention. It is the conscious choice to move your focus from the world of concepts, stories, and narratives, the endless chatter about what happened and what might happen, to the world of direct sensory experience. This sensory world is your constant, unwavering portal to the now. It is the intricate pattern on a leaf, the taste of water in your mouth, the feeling of your feet planted firmly on the ground. This reality is always available, always waiting beneath the noise of our thinking. It is our home base, our sanctuary, our only true refuge from the storms of the mind. When we are fully engaged with what is happening right now, the mind's ability to create regret and anxiety diminishes, for it has no room to operate. There is no space left for the ghosts of the past or the phantoms of the future when the light of your full attention is occupying the present. The great Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh spoke of this with a beautiful and transformative simplicity. He used the example of washing the dishes. He observed that for most people, washing the dishes is a chore, an unpleasant task to be rushed through in order to get to the better part of the evening, perhaps enjoying a cup of tea afterwards. While they are at the sink, their hands in the warm water, they are not really there. Their mind is already in the future, with the tea. They are thinking about how good the tea will taste, how relaxing it will be. They rush through the washing, dry their hands, and finally sit down with their coveted cup of tea. But now, as they drink the tea, are they truly there? Now they are thinking about what they need to do tomorrow, worrying about a meeting at work, or planning their weekend. Their body is holding the teacup, but their mind has already left, journeying into the next set of plans and anxieties. They were not present for the dishes, and now they are not present for the tea. In this way, he said, they are never truly alive. They are phantoms, floating through their own lives, never making contact with reality. The master's teaching was this: while washing the dishes, you should be washing the dishes. This means you are fully aware of the act. You are aware that you are standing there, washing. You feel the warmth of the water on your hands. You can smell the light fragrance of the soap. You can hear the sound of the water against the ceramic plates. You are not trying to get it over with. You are simply living the moment of washing the dishes. In fact, you can see it as a miracle. This plate, this water, these hands, they are all a manifestation of life. When you wash the dishes this way, you are not a slave to a chore. You are a master of the present moment. And the profound secret is this: if you are unable to find peace and be fully alive while washing the dishes, you will be unable to find it while drinking your tea. The way you do anything is the way you do everything. Happiness is not waiting for you at the end of some task. It is available within the task itself if you choose to be there for it. The miracle is not to walk on water. The miracle is to walk on this green earth, to wash this simple dish and be completely, utterly alive. This principle can be extended to every single activity of your day, transforming the mundane into the sacred. When you eat, just eat. Turn off the television, put down the phone, and engage with your food. Notice the colors on your plate, smell the aromas. When you take a bite, chew slowly. Can you identify the different flavors? The sweetness, the saltiness, the texture. Feel the simple gratitude for the nourishment that is sustaining your body. When you walk, just walk. Instead of being lost in thought, your body on autopilot moving from point A to point B, bring your attention to the act of walking itself. Feel the solid ground beneath your feet. Notice the rhythm of your steps, the swing of your arms, the feeling of the air moving past your face. Each step can be a moment of peace, a destination in itself. When you are at work, when you are speaking with a loved one, when you are listening to music, bring this same quality of attention to the moment. Give it your full presence. This not only dissolves the background hum of anxiety, but also makes you far more effective, creative, and compassionate in everything you do. There is a timeless story about a man who was convinced that happiness was a hidden treasure, something to be acquired in a distant land. He bid farewell to his family and his simple village and began a great quest. For many years, he traveled the world. He climbed the most forbidding mountains, sailed across the stormiest seas, and walked through the most bewildering deserts. He visited grand cities of unimaginable wealth and sought counsel from wise gurus in remote monasteries. He was always seeking, always asking, where can I find lasting happiness? He gathered much knowledge, saw many wonders, but the quiet, unshakable contentment he longed for always eluded him. Finally, old, tired, and disheartened, he gave up. He made the long journey back to the humble village he had left so long ago. He walked into his small, dusty, forgotten house. It was a cold evening, and with a heavy heart, he lit a fire in the hearth. He found an old clay pot, filled it with water from the well, and set it on the fire to boil. He found a small pouch of tea leaves, brittle with age, and prepared himself a simple cup of tea. He sat down on the floor, with nowhere else to go, no one else to ask, and nothing left to seek. He held the warm cup in his trembling hands and felt the heat seep into his bones. He watched the steam dance in the firelight. He brought the cup to his lips and inhaled its simple, earthy fragrance. Then he took a sip, and for the very first time in his life, he truly tasted the tea. He felt its warmth spread through his chest. He was aware of the fire crackling, the feeling of the rough floor beneath him, the quiet solitude of his own home. In that single, unadorned moment of pure presence, a feeling of deep peace and a gentle, quiet joy arose within him. He began to smile, tears welling in his eyes, as he realized the treasure he had circled the globe to find had been waiting for him here, all along, in this simple cup of tea, in this present moment. This story is our story. We are all on a quest, searching for happiness in the next achievement, the next relationship, the next purchase, the next destination. We are constantly washing the dishes to get to the tea. Zen wisdom gently invites us to stop running. It asks us to come home, to the here and now, and to discover the richness that is already present in our ordinary lives. However, this is simple, but it is not always easy. The mind has the momentum of a lifetime of wandering. Its habit is to jump from past to future, like a restless monkey swinging from branch to branch. To simply command it to be still is often futile. We need an anchor, something gentle yet firm, that can hold our attention in the present when the winds of thought and emotion begin to blow. We need a tool that is always with us, as portable and as vital as our own existence. That anchor That tool is the breath. The journey into the present moment is a homecoming, but our minds, long accustomed to wandering, do not settle easily. We have spent a lifetime allowing our attention to be pulled into the past and flung into the future. The mind is like a restless monkey, as the ancient texts say, swinging wildly from the branch of one thought to the next, never still, never content. To simply command this monkey to be calm is to invite frustration. You cannot tame a wild creature with force. You must offer it a place of rest, something to hold on to that is steady and soothing. You need an anchor. That anchor, the most reliable and intimate tool you will ever possess for calming the mind and returning to the now, is your breath. The breath is unique. It is not a mental concept or a distant philosophy. It is a tangible, physical process, a rhythmic dance at the center of your being. And its most powerful characteristic is its absolute honesty. It can only ever exist in the present moment. You cannot take a breath that is in the past. You cannot inhale a future breath. To be aware of your breathing is, by definition, to be here, now. It is the thread that stitches mind and body together, the bridge between the world of thought and the world of physical sensation. When your mind is lost in a labyrinth of worry, the feeling of the breath is the gentle hand that leads you back out into the open air of the present. This connection is not just metaphorical, it is deeply physiological. Your mental state and your breathing pattern are in a constant, intricate feedback loop. When you are anxious or frightened, your breath becomes shallow, rapid, and irregular, activating the body's sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight response. Your heart rate increases, muscles tense, and your body prepares for a perceived danger. Conversely, when you are calm and relaxed, your breath is naturally slow, deep, and rhythmic, originating from the diaphragm. This type of breathing stimulates the vagus nerve and activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest response. This is a crucial insight. The connection works both ways. Just as your anxious thoughts can make your breath chaotic, you can consciously use your breath to calm your anxious thoughts. By intentionally making your breath slower, deeper, and more regular, you send a direct, biological signal to your brain that says, all is well, you are safe. It is a gentle and powerful way to hack into your own nervous system and guide yourself out of a state of anxiety and back to a state of equilibrium. The practice itself is beautifully simple. There is no need for a special location or equipment. You can do it right now, wherever you are. Find a comfortable posture, either sitting on a chair with your feet flat on the floor or on a cushion on the ground. The important thing is to have your spine relatively upright, but not rigid, to allow your lungs and diaphragm to move freely. Close your eyes gently or lower your gaze to a soft focus on the floor in front of you. Now, simply bring your attention to the physical sensation of breathing. You can choose to rest your awareness at the tip of your nostrils, feeling the subtle coolness of the air as it enters your body and the slightly warmer sensation of the air as it leaves. Or, you can place a hand on your abdomen and feel the gentle expansion, the rise of your belly on the in-breath, and the gentle contraction, the fall of your belly on the out-breath. This is the entire instruction. Rest your attention on one of these sensations, and now comes the most important part. Within a few seconds, or perhaps a few minutes, you will notice that your mind has wandered. You will be lost in a thought, a memory, a plan. This is not a mistake. This is not a failure. This is simply what minds do. The moment you realize your mind has wandered is a moment of perfect mindfulness. In that moment, without any judgment or frustration, you gently acknowledge where the mind has gone. Thinking. And then you tenderly, patiently, guide your attention back to the feeling of the breath. That is the entire practice. The mind wanders, you notice, you gently return. 1,000 times, the mind will wander. 1,000 times, you will gently return. Each return is a moment of victory. Each return is a strengthening of your muscle of attention, a small act of reclaiming your own mind with compassion. This is not a practice of perfection, but a practice of patience. This very act of returning to the breath is one of the most powerful scenes in the story of the Buddha. As he sat beneath the great Bodhi tree on the night of his enlightenment, he was not left in peace. He was assailed by a figure named Mara, Mara is not some external red-skinned demon with horns. Mara is a symbol for the totality of our own inner resistance, our own deepest fears, temptations, and habits of delusion. Mara is the voice of the ego, the lord of illusion. First, Mara sent his most beautiful daughters to tempt Siddhartha with visions of sensual pleasure and worldly power. But Siddhartha did not engage. He simply stayed with his breath. The visions, having nothing to hook into, dissolved. Then, Mara, enraged, summoned his terrifying armies. These were the armies of fear, of anger, of doubt, of greed, of despair. They swirled around the seated figure, firing arrows of hateful thoughts and terrifying visions. They whispered in his ear, "Who do you think you are to seek enlightenment? Look at all your past failures. You are not worthy." These are the same armies that assail us every day. But Siddhartha did not fight back. He did not argue with the demons. He did not try to reason with the voice of doubt. To do so would be to give them reality. Instead, he simply sat, still and unwavering, and returned his attention, again and again, to the simple, humble, undeniable reality of his own breathing, the in-breath, the out-breath. This was his anchor in the midst of the hurricane of illusion. The arrows of fear and anger, upon approaching the stillness of his presence, are said to have turned into flowers, falling harmlessly at his feet. The armies of Mara, finding no purchase, no reactivity, no fear to feed on, lost their power and vanished like mist in the morning sun. We are all sitting under our own Bodhi tree. Our Mara is the panic attack that rises in our chest, the surge of rage in traffic, the nagging voice of our inner critic, the seductive pull of addiction. The Buddha's story teaches us the secret to victory. We do not win by fighting Mara on his own terms. We win by disengaging. We win by coming home to something that is more real than the illusion. When the armies of your own anxious thoughts begin their assault, the practice is to follow his example. Do not argue with them. Do not believe them. Do not fight them. Simply acknowledge their presence, and then return your awareness to the anchor. The feeling of your belly rising and falling, that is real. The catastrophic story your mind is telling you is not. This makes your breath a portable sanctuary, a refuge that is available to you in every moment of your life. When you are in a difficult meeting, feeling overwhelmed, you can secretly come back to the feeling of one conscious in-breath and out-breath. No one will even know you are doing it. But in that small moment, you are stepping out of the stream of reactivity and into a place of centeredness. When you are feeling the sting of a painful memory, you can anchor yourself in the breath to avoid being swept away by the story. When you are waiting for news, good or bad, you can stay with the breath to remain grounded in the present instead of spiraling into fictional futures. Each conscious breath is a small revolution, a quiet declaration of freedom. Having found this anchor, this reliable tool that can bring us out of the phantom worlds of past and future and ground us in the living reality of the now, we are prepared. We are now equipped to look at one of the most stubborn and pervasive sources of our daily stress. With the stability of the breath as our foundation, we can dare to examine the tightly clenched fist at the center of our psyche, the deep-seated need to control everything, and the profound illusion that such control is ever truly possible. With our breath as our steady anchor in the present moment, we are now able to safely examine one of the most fundamental yet stressful habits of the human mind, the relentless drive for control. Imagine for a moment that you clench your fist as tightly as you can. Feel the tension in your fingers, your palm, your wrist, even up into your forearm. Feel the strain, the rigidity, the effort it takes to maintain that grip. This clenched fist is a perfect metaphor for the default state of the modern mind. We live our lives with a psychic fist, constantly trying to grasp, to manage, to force the fluid, unpredictable nature of life into a shape that we deem acceptable. This drive manifests in every area of our lives. We try to control the external world, our career trajectory, our financial outcomes, the precise scheduling of our days. We attempt to control other people, their opinions of us, their feelings for us, their actions. We want our partners, our children, and our colleagues to behave according to our script. And perhaps most exhaustingly, we try to control our own internal world. We believe we should be able to command our emotions, to simply decide not to be sad, not to be angry, not to be afraid. We try to police our thoughts, berating ourselves for having negative or unwanted thoughts, as if we could somehow clench our mental fist hard enough to squeeze them out of existence. This constant effort, this perpetual state of striving and resisting, is the source of so much of our anxiety and exhaustion. We are at war with reality, and we are paying the price. To understand how to open this fist, we must first understand why we clench it so tightly. The root of all control is fear. We are afraid of the vast, beautiful, terrifying uncertainty of life. We fear failure, so we try to control every variable of a project to guarantee success. We fear rejection, so we try to manage other people's perceptions of us, wearing masks and carefully curating our personalities. We fear loss, so we cling tightly to the people we love, sometimes suffocating them with our need for reassurance. We fear discomfort, so we try to control our inner state, avoiding emotions that we have labeled as bad or negative. This drive for control is the ego's primary survival strategy. The ego, that small constructed sense of self, believes that if it can just arrange all the pieces on the board correctly, if it can manage every person and every outcome, then it will finally be safe. It will finally be happy. It will finally be invulnerable. But this strategy is based on a profound illusion, and it is doomed to fail, creating immense suffering in the process. Firstly, it is an impossible task. The universe is an infinitely complex web of interconnected causes and effects. The idea that our small, individual will can somehow dictate its flow is a delusion of grandeur. It is like a single sailor trying to command the tides of the entire ocean. Life is inherently wild, messy, and uncontrollable. Secondly, this constant effort to control creates a state of chronic tension. Living with a clenched fist, both literally and metaphorically, is exhausting. It keeps our nervous system in a perpetual state of high alert, burning our energy on a futile battle against what is. When reality, as it always does, fails to conform to our rigid plans, we are met with frustration, anger, and disappointment. Lastly, it robs us of joy. When we are focused on controlling the outcome of an experience, we cannot be present for the experience itself. A simple conversation becomes a strategic negotiation instead of a genuine connection. A creative project becomes a source of anxiety about the result rather than a joyful process of discovery. We are so busy trying to steer the boat that we completely miss the beauty of the shoreline we are passing. There is a story that brilliantly illustrates this self-inflicted imprisonment. In many parts of the world, a simple yet ingenious trap is used to catch monkeys. A hunter takes a coconut or a gourd, makes a small hole in it, and hollows it out. The hole is just large enough for a monkey to slide its open hand inside. The hunter then places some bait inside nuts, or sweet rice sand chains the gourd to a tree. Sooner or later, a monkey will come along. Smelling the delicious bait, it will slip its hand through the narrow opening and grasp the prize. It now has a fistful of nuts. But here is the crux of the trap. When the monkey tries to withdraw its hand, the clenched fist, now larger than the opening, will not come out. The monkey is caught. It will pull and shriek. It will struggle with all its might, growing more and more frantic and terrified, but it cannot get free. The tragic irony is that the monkey is not truly trapped by the gourd. There are no bars, no cage. The trap is not holding the monkey is holding the trap. It is being held captive by its own craving, its own tightly clenched fist. The hunter can simply walk up and capture the terrified creature. At any moment, the monkey has the key to its own freedom. All it has to do is open its hand, let go of the nuts, and its slender hand would slide out with ease. But its attachment, its desperate desire for the prize, is so powerful that it cannot bring itself to let go. And so, for the sake of a handful of nuts, it sacrifices its own life, its own freedom. We are that monkey. The nuts are all the things we desperately cling to, the things we believe we must have in order to be happy. It is the need to be right in an argument. It is the unwavering demand that our partner behave in a certain way. It is the attachment to a specific career outcome. It is the insistence that life should be fair, that things should not be as they are. Our clenched fist is our rigid attachment to these desires. And the trap, the feeling of being stuck, anxious, frustrated, and powerless, is the suffering we create for ourselves. We blame the trapway, blame our job, our spouse, the economy, the world. But all along, the source of our entrapment is our own grip. Freedom is always available, but it requires the one thing that feels most terrifying to the ego: letting go of the prize. This understanding leads us to a crucial redefinition of what it means to be in control. If trying to control the external world is a monkey's game, a futile and stressful delusion, then where does our true power lie? Both ancient Stoic philosophy and Zen wisdom point to the same answer. The only domain where you have any real, lasting, and absolute control is over your own mind and your own response to what life brings. You cannot control whether it rains on the day of your outdoor party, but you have 100% control over whether you respond with rage and despair or with grace and creativity, moving the party indoors and enjoying it anyway. You cannot control what another person says or does, but you have complete power over how you choose to interpret their actions and how you choose to respond with reactivity and anger or with patience and understanding. This is the shift from external, illusory control to internal, authentic power. It is the realization that true strength is not the ability to bend the world to your will, but the ability to bend your own mind to meet the world with wisdom and equanimity. It is an immense, unshakable power because it is not dependent on anything outside of you. It cannot be taken away by a change in fortune, by another person's opinion, or by the unpredictable turns of life. It is your ultimate refuge. This brings us to a vital turning point on our journey. We have seen how the clenched fist of control, born of fear, traps us in a cycle of struggle and suffering. The story of the monkey shows us that the key to freedom is simply to open the hand. But our entire life, we have been taught that letting go is a sign of weakness, of failure, of giving up. What does it really mean to let go? Is it a passive, fatalistic resignation to whatever happens? The Zen tradition offers a profoundly different interpretation. It sees the act of letting go not as an act of defeat, but as an act of supreme intelligence, courage, and grace. It is the very heart of wisdom. The journey inward has brought us face to face with our deepest habits, our attachment to a ghostly past, our anxiety about a fictional future, and our desperate, clenching need for control. We have seen that this clenched fist, born of fear, is the very source of our entrapment, just like the monkey who sacrifices its freedom for a handful of nuts. The key to that trap, the secret to opening the fist, is a concept that is as simple to say as it is profoundly misunderstood: letting go. In our culture, the idea of letting go is often viewed with suspicion. It can sound like weakness, like giving up. It conjures images of passive resignation, of becoming a doormat, of simply allowing life to happen to us without a fight. We are taught to be strong, to persevere, to take control, and never surrender. From this perspective, letting go feels like an act of defeat. But the wisdom of Zen offers a radical reinterpretation. It sees letting go not as an act of weakness, but as an act of profound strength, intelligence, and courage. It is not about giving up. It is about giving up the futile struggle. It is the art of cooperating with the inevitable. To truly understand this, we must first be clear about what letting go is not. It is not apathy. It is not about ceasing to care. In fact, it allows you to care more deeply and effectively, but from a place of wisdom rather than fear. At its core, letting go is the conscious decision to abandon the futile war with reality. It is the recognition that arguing with what has already happened, or with what is happening right now, is a pointless and exhausting exercise. Reality will always win. You can stand in the middle of a rainstorm and scream at the sky that it should not be raining, but you will only end up angry and wet. Letting go is the wisdom of choosing to get an umbrella instead. It is the release of that silent, inner demand that things should be different from how they are. This should is the grit in the machinery of our minds, the source of immense friction and suffering. Letting go is the simple, yet revolutionary, act of dropping the should and meeting the is. There is a powerful Zen teaching that illustrates this with perfect clarity. A master was giving a lecture to her students. She walked into the room, and without a word, she picked up a glass of water from a table and held it up for all to see. The students leaned forward, expecting a profound metaphor about emptiness or the illusory nature of self. But instead, the master simply asked, "How heavy is this glass of water?" The students were puzzled for a moment, then began to call out answers. 8 ounces, said one. 12 ounces, said another. It looks like about a pound, offered a third. The master smiled gently. The absolute weight of the glass is not the important thing, she said. The perceived weight depends entirely on how long I hold it. She continued, if I hold it for a minute, it feels quite light. If I hold it for an hour, my arm will begin to ache and feel numb. If I hold it for an entire day, my arm will cramp up and I might feel as though it's paralyzed. In each case, the actual weight of the glass has not changed, but the longer I hold on to it, the heavier and more unbearable it becomes. She looked into the eyes of her students. Your worries, your regrets, your resentments, your anxieties, they are all just like this glass of water. If you think about them for a few moments, it is no great burden. If you carry them around in your mind for an entire day, they will begin to cause you pain. If you hold on to them day after day, week after week, you will become paralyzed by their weight, incapable of thinking about or doing anything else. She paused, then asked, "So, what is the solution when the glass becomes too heavy?" A student quietly replied, "Put the glass down." "Exactly," the master said. "To find relief, you must put the glass down." Letting go is the simple, sane, and necessary act of putting down the glass. The regret you have been carrying for 10 years, the anger at someone who wronged you, the chronic anxiety about your future, these are the glass of water you are holding. The act of ruminating, of replaying the stories, of feeding the grievances, is the act of holding the glass. It takes enormous energy. Letting go does not deny that the event happened. It does not mean the glass of water doesn't exist. It simply means you are no longer willing to exhaust yourself by carrying it. You put it down, and in that moment, your hand is free, your energy is restored, you are liberated. This brings us to another critical distinction. Letting go is not the same as passive inaction. This is where many of us get confused. Putting down the glass of worry does not mean you lie down and do nothing. Remember the farmer? He let go of his worry about the rain, the part he could not control. He then took action by mending his roof, the part he could control. This is the difference between neurotic clinging and wise action. Action that comes from a place of attachment and control is rigid, stressful, and fixated on a single outcome. We pour our energy into it, but our happiness is entirely conditional on getting the result we want. If we don't, we suffer. Action that comes from a place of letting go is different. It is what Zen calls right action, or non-attached action. You see what needs to be done, and you do it with your full presence and skill. You pour your entire being into the act itself, finding joy in the process, but you release your desperate grip on the outcome. You write the best book you can, and then you let go of whether it becomes a bestseller. You love your children with all your heart, and then you let go of the need for them to follow the specific life path you have envisioned for them. You do your part, and you let the rest of the universe do its part. This kind of action is free, creative, and liberating. It is free from the poison of anxiety about the result. When we finally summon the courage to open our clenched fist, to put down the glass of water, something miraculous happens. We create space. As long as we are clenching, our hands and our minds are full. There is no room for anything new to enter. When we let go of our rigid ideas about how life must be, we create a spaciousness within ourselves. It is a space where peace can finally take root, no longer crowded out by the effort of resistance. It is a space where new possibilities and solutions can emerge. When you are not fixated on one single path, you suddenly notice all the other paths that were there all along, paths to which you were previously blind. It is a space where your own intuition, your own deeper wisdom, can finally be heard, no longer drowned out by the shouting of the fearful ego. Life can surprise you in the most beautiful ways, but only if you give it enough room. Letting go, then, is the master key. It is the wisdom of the open hand over the clenched fist. It is the sanity of putting down the burden that is causing you pain. We have explored what this means, and we have seen its power in the simple metaphor of the glass of water. But for many of us, it can still feel like a monumental task. Where do we even begin to practice something so vast in the midst of our complex and emotional lives? The most fertile training ground, the most immediate place to practice opening our hand, is with the very energies that cause us to clench it in the first place. We can begin by learning how to skillfully and compassionately meet the powerful currents of our own anger, our own fear, and our own sorrow. The wisdom of letting go is a key that can unlock the chains of the past and future, but its true power is tested when we are in the grip of a powerful emotion. For most of us, emotions like anger, fear, jealousy, and deep sadness are not just experiences, they are emergencies. When they arise, our immediate instinct is to declare war. We engage in two primary tactics, both of which are forms of violence against ourselves, and both of which ultimately fail. The first tactic is suppression. We treat the emotion like an enemy combatant to be captured and locked in the dungeon of our subconscious. We tell ourselves, I shouldn't feel this way. Strong people don't get scared. Good people don't get this angry. We clench our jaw, put on a brave face, and try to power through, pretending the feeling isn't there. This is like trying to hold a large, inflated beach ball underwater. It takes a tremendous and constant expenditure of energy to keep it submerged, and inevitably, our grip will slip. When it does, the emotion erupts to the surface with a force far greater than it originally had, often at an inappropriate time and directed at an innocent target. The dam of suppression always, eventually, breaks. The second tactic is the opposite: uncontrolled expression. Instead of locking the emotion away, we become completely possessed by it. We don't just feel anger, we become the anger. We are a vessel entirely filled with its raw, chaotic energy. In this state, we say and do things that cause immense harm to ourselves and to others, things we later regret. We are swept away by the flood, a helpless victim of our own inner weather. In both strategy suppression and explosion, we are not free. We are being controlled by our emotions, either as their jailer or as their hostage. Zen practice offers a third way, a path of wisdom and compassion that lies between these two extremes. This path begins with a radical proposition. Emotions are not your enemy. They are not intrinsically good or bad. They are simply energy arising in your body and mind. They are like patterns of weather moving through the vast sky of your awareness. Anger is a thunderstorm. Sadness is a slow, steady rain. Joy is a bright, sunny day. To judge the weather is pointless. To fight it is futile. The wise approach is not to fight the weather, but to learn how to meet it with skill and understanding. Emotions, from this perspective, are not problems to be solved. They are messengers to be heard. They carry vital information about our needs, our beliefs, and the places within us that need healing and attention. The Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh offers the most beautiful and effective metaphor for this practice. He asks us to think of our anger, our fear, or our sorrow as a small, crying baby. Imagine you are in your home, peacefully reading a book, and from another room, you hear your infant begin to cry. What is your first instinct? If you are a loving parent, you do not shout from the other room, "Stop crying, you are bothering me." You do not lock the door to the baby's room and pretend you cannot hear it. That would be cruel and unthinkable. Instead, your immediate response is to stop what you are doing, go to the baby, and gently pick it up. You cradle the baby in your arms. You hold it tenderly. The first and most important action is to offer it your calming, loving presence. You might say, "Oh, my little one, I am here for you now. I hear that you are suffering. Let me hold you." This, the Master teaches, is exactly how we should treat our own emotions. Your anger is your crying baby. Your fear is your crying baby. When a strong emotion arises, it is a signal that your inner child is suffering. The practice of mindfulness is the practice of being a loving parent to yourself. You do not scold the emotion. You do not suppress it. You turn your attention inward and you tenderly pick up the baby. You hold your anger with the same care and non-judgmental presence that you would offer a crying child. This beautiful analogy can be translated into a direct, practical technique for emotional transformation. Let's use the powerful energy of anger as our example. The moment you feel the heat of anger beginning to rise in your chest, that is the sound of the baby crying. Here is how you practice. First, you recognize. This is the act of stopping and walking to the baby's room. You simply pause, and you name what is happening internally without judgment. Ah, this is anger. The energy of anger is arising in me. This simple act of naming is incredibly powerful. It immediately creates a tiny sliver of space between you and the anger. You are no longer completely identified with it. You are the one who is noticing the anger. Second, you accept. This is the act of picking the baby up. Instead of resisting the feeling and thinking, "This is terrible. I need to get rid of this feeling," you give it permission to exist. You say to yourself, "It is okay that this feeling is here. For this moment, I allow this anger to be in me." This acceptance immediately stops the secondary struggle. You stop fighting with yourself. You are no longer pouring the fuel of resistance onto the fire of the emotion. Third, you investigate with compassion. This is the act of cradling the baby and trying to understand what is wrong. This is not a mental analysis of why you are angry, getting lost in the story. "He said this, and then I said that, and he's always like this," is like leaving the crying baby in the crib while you go to the library to read books about why babies cry. The investigation is somatic. It is in the body. You bring a gentle, curious attention to the raw physical sensations of the emotion. You ask, where is this anger living in my body right now? Is it a tightness in your jaw, a burning sensation in your stomach, a pressure behind your eyes, clenched fists? You simply notice these sensations. You breathe with them. You breathe into them. You are holding the raw energy of the emotion in a safe, compassionate embrace, just as you would hold the trembling body of a crying child. Fourth, throughout this process, you practice non-identification. This is the constant, gentle reminder that you are the parent, not the baby. You are the vast, loving awareness that is holding the emotion. The anger is an experience happening within you. It is not the totality of you. You are the sky, and the anger is a powerful thunderstorm passing through. The storm is real, but the sky remains vast, open, and unharmed by its passing. When an emotion is met with this kind of mindful, tender, and non-judgmental attention, a miracle of transformation occurs. It is not destroyed, it is metabolized. The energy that was once a destructive flood, when held in the safe container of your awareness, is allowed to flow, to run its course, and to naturally recede. When you don't feed the fire with the story, and you don't try to suppress its heat, the flame simply, naturally, burns itself out. The anger might soften into a clear understanding of where a boundary was crossed, giving you the clarity to speak your truth without aggression. The fear might soften into a recognition of what is truly precious to you and what needs to be protected with wisdom. The emotion, once seen and held, delivers its message and then quietly departs, leaving behind not a scar, but a lesson. To turn towards our inner storms in this way, to face the crying baby instead of running from it, requires a unique kind of courage. It is not the aggressive strength of a clenched fist. It is not the brittle strength of a rigid wall. It is a different kind of power, a power that is found not in resistance, but in yielding. It is the profound strength of softness, of flexibility, of resilience. It is the strength of the willow tree that bends in the storm and survives, while the mighty oak that resists is snapped in two. This realization that true mastery comes from intelligent, compassionate yielding leads us directly to one of the most subtle and potent concepts in Eastern wisdom, the art of flowing with the current of life. The practice of meeting our emotions with mindful tenderness teaches us a profound lesson. Fighting with our inner world is a losing battle. This insight reveals a different kind of strength, one that is not based on hardness, aggression, or resistance, but on the surprising power of softness. Our culture tends to glorify the oak tree, a symbol of unyielding might, standing rigid and defiant against the elements. We are taught to be like the oak, strong, tough, and immovable. But Zen wisdom, sharing a deep current with Taoism, invites us to consider the wisdom of the reed or the bamboo. It asks us to look at the nature of water. It suggests that true strength, the strength that endures, is found not in rigidity, but in yielding. There is a timorous fable that captures this principle perfectly. In a wide field, there grew a magnificent ancient oak tree. Its trunk was thick and gnarled. Its branches reached towards the heavens like powerful arms, and its roots gripped the earth with an arrogant certainty. It was the master of its domain, a monument to permanence and power. Near its base, along the bank of a winding river, grew a slender, humble reed. The oak tree often scoffed at the reed. "You poor, flimsy thing," the oak would thunder when the breeze picked up. "Look at you, bowing and scraping to every little puff of wind. You have no dignity, no strength. Watch me. I do not bend for anyone or anything." The reed would simply sway, offering no reply. One day, the sky turned a dark, bruised purple. The wind began to howl, and a great storm, a tempest of furious power, descended upon the land. The oak tree, true to its nature, braced itself for the fight. It met the roaring wind with pure, stubborn resistance. Its mighty trunk shuddered, its branches groaned under the strain, but it would not yield. It was a battle of wills, brute force against brute force. The wind, however, was tireless and formless. It slammed against the oak again and again, until finally, with a deafening crack that echoed like a gunshot, the great tree's trunk splintered. The magnificent oak came crashing to the earth, a testament to the limits of its own rigidity. Meanwhile, the humble reed met the storm in an entirely different way. As the wind's fury mounted, the reed did not resist. It simply yielded. It bent lower and lower, offering no opposition, until it was lying almost flat against the ground, its body a supple curve against the earth. The hurricane raged above it, but it could find no purchase, nothing to break. When the storm finally passed and the sun emerged from behind the clouds, the land was littered with fallen branches and debris. The mighty oak was a shattered ruin, and the slender reed, glistening with raindrops in the morning light, slowly, gracefully, rose up again, entirely unharmed. The fable leaves us with a simple, penetrating question. Which of the two was truly the stronger? This story is a map of our own inner life. The oak mind is the mind of the ego, the mind of control. It is made of our rigid opinions, our fixed plans, our stubborn attachments, and our absolute insistence that life must unfold according to our will. When life, in the form of a storm of financial crisis, a sudden illness, a painful breakup unleashes its unpredictable power, the oak mind tries to fight it. It says, "This should not be happening." It resists, it denies, it rages against reality, and this very resistance is what causes it to break. This is the anatomy of a breakdown, of burnout, of despair. It is the shattering that comes from inflexibility. The reed mind, however, represents a mind trained in wisdom. It is flexible, adaptable, and resilient. This does not mean it is without foundation. The reed is still firmly rooted in the earth. It has its values, its integrity. But when the winds of change blow, and they always do it, does not waste its precious energy in a futile battle with the inevitable. It yields, it adapts, it bends. It flows with the force that is greater than itself. And by yielding, it preserves its life, its energy, its essence. It survives the storm not through brute force, but through intelligence and grace. This principle of wise yielding is perfectly encapsulated in the Taoist concept of Wu Wei, a teaching that has been deeply absorbed into the spirit of Zen. Wu Wei is often translated as non-action or effortless action, but these translations can be misleading. It does not mean being passive, lazy, or inert. Wu Wei is the art of acting in harmony with the natural flow of life. It is action without struggle, action without the grinding resistance of the ego's will. Think of a master surfer on a giant wave. The surfer is the embodiment of Wu Wei. She is not controlling the wave. That would be absurd. She is not fighting the wave. That would be suicidal. She is using her profound skill, sensitivity, and balance to align her own energy with the immense power of the wave. To an observer, she appears to be dancing with the ocean, her movements graceful, efficient, and joyful. She is acting, but it is an effortless action because it is in perfect harmony with the forces around her. This is the nature of Wu Wei. It is swapping the brute force of the motorboat, which thrashes against the water, for the silent, graceful skill of the sailor, who uses the wind itself to move forward. The classic Taoist texts use the metaphor of water to explain this power. Water is the softest and most yielding substance in the world. You cannot grasp it or strike it, yet it can overcome the hardest of things, like stone. Water does not attack the rock. It flows around it, over it, under it. With gentle, patient persistence, it will, over Timmy, wear the hardest granite down into soft sand. It achieves its aim not through direct confrontation, but through its relentless adaptability and softness. Our practice is to cultivate a mind that is like water, fluid, responsive, and powerful in its ability to yield. How then do we practice becoming more like the reed and less like the oak in our daily lives? The first step is mindfulness of resistance. Begin to notice, with a gentle curiosity, the feeling of being an oak. Notice the physical sensations, the clenched jaw, the tightened shoulders, the shallow breath that arises when things do not go according to your plan. Notice the mental state, the inner narrative of no, that arises when you are faced with an unpleasant or unexpected reality. This is the feeling of your inner oak bracing for a fight. When you notice this hardening, this resistance, you can consciously experiment with softening. You can intentionally soften the muscles in your body, let your jaw go slack, drop your shoulders, breathe into your belly, and you can soften your mind. This means consciously releasing the rigid should or should not, and opening to the reality of what is. You can ask yourself a simple question: can I allow this moment to be exactly as it is, just for now? This question is not about condoning a bad situation or giving up on changing it. It is about stopping the internal war first, so that you can then act from a place of clarity and peace, rather than from a place of blind reactivity. The strength of the oak is the strength of a brittle fortress. The strength of the reed is the strength of a skilled warrior. This ability to yield, to flow, to act with the grace of Wu Wei is not born from a cold, detached strategy. It is not a life hack for better productivity. This profound softness toward the world arises from a deep wellspring of warmth and kindness. To be soft with the inevitable challenges of life, we must first learn how to be soft with ourselves. The flexibility of the reed is rooted in its complete acceptance of its own nature. This leads us directly to the cultivation of that inner warmth, the healing and essential art of self-compassion. The journey towards a softer, more flexible way of being, to the way of the reed over the oak, begins, not with our relationship to the world, but with our relationship to ourselves. For many of us, there is a constant, simmering war being waged within our own minds, and the primary aggressor is a voice we know all too well, the voice of the inner critic. It is that relentless, internal narrator that sits in judgment of our every move. It's the voice that whispers, "You're not smart enough for this," after a difficult meeting. It's the voice that shouts, "You idiot, you've failed again," after a mistake. It is the tireless comparison machine, constantly showing us how we fall short when measured against others. We would never dream of speaking to a friend, or even a stranger, with the brutal, unforgiving harshness we routinely inflict upon ourselves. This inner critic is the ultimate oak, tree-rigid in its demands for perfection, brittle in its judgments, and the source of our own inner storms. We often tolerate this inner tyrant because we have been conditioned to believe that it is necessary. We operate under the flawed assumption that being hard on ourselves is what motivates us, that it is the engine of our ambition and the safeguard against laziness. We believe that self-flagellation is the price of achievement, but both ancient wisdom and modern psychology reveal that this could not be further from the truth. Self-criticism is not a motivator, it is a threat. When the inner critic attacks, it activates the same primal threat defense system in our brain that a predator in the wild would. Our bodies are flooded with cortisol and adrenaline. We are thrown into a state of fight, flight, or freeze. This state is terrible for learning, for creativity, and for growth. It makes us terrified of failure, and so we become less willing to take the healthy risks necessary to learn and succeed. Trying to motivate yourself with self-criticism is like trying to teach a child to walk by screaming at them every timmy they stumble. It doesn't create grace, it creates fear. The wise and effective alternative to this inner war is the practice of self-compassion. It is crucial to understand that self-compassion is not self-pity, self-indulgence, or making excuses for bad behavior. Self-pity says, "Poor me," and gets lost in the story of victimhood. Self-indulgence is giving in to any whim, regardless of its long-term harm. Self-compassion is different. It is simply the act of extending the same kindness, care, and understanding to yourself that you would naturally offer to a dear friend who was suffering. It is a warm, courageous, and wise response to our own pain and imperfection. The practice can be understood through three core elements. The first is mindfulness, simply acknowledging that we are in pain without exaggerating or suppressing it. The second is a sense of common humanity, recognizing that suffering and failure are not personal defects, but a fundamental part of the shared human experience. And the third is self-kindness, actively responding to our suffering with warmth, gentleness, and comfort, rather than with cold judgment. There is a beautiful Zen story about a young potter who was obsessed with perfection. He dedicated his life to creating the perfect bowline, with flawless symmetry, a smooth, unblemished glaze, and a form that was the pure embodiment of beauty. But he was a miserable perfectionist. Every timmy he pulled a new bowl from the kiln, his eyes would immediately find a flower tiny crack in the glaze, a slight asymmetry, a rough spot. Overcome with frustration and a sense of failure, he would smash the imperfect bowl and begin again. His life a relentless cycle of high hopes and bitter disappointment. An old Zen master, who was himself a legendary potter, watched the young man's torment for many days. One afternoon, as the young potter was about to smash yet another bowl, this one with a fine, almost invisible crack down its side, the old master gently stopped his hand. "Wait," he said, taking the bowl. "I understand that you see this crack as a failure. You see it as the one thing that makes this bowl worthless." The young man nodded, his face tight with shame. The master then carried the bowl outside. He filled it with rich, dark soil and carefully planted a single, tiny flower seed within it. He placed the bowl in a sunny spot on the windowsill. "You see," the master explained softly, "the crack does not make the bowl useless. Now, it has a new purpose. It can become a home for a flower, and sometimes, the crack itself is the most important part of the story. It is a record of the journey this bowl took in the fire. It is what gives the bowl its unique character. And," he added with a smile, "it is often through the cracks that the light gets in." This story is a profound teaching on self-compassion. We are all the cracked bowl. Our cracks are our perceived imperfections, our failures, our mistakes, our vulnerabilities, our physical and emotional scars. The inner critic is the tormented potter, demanding an inhuman, sterile perfection, ready to smash the entire vessel at the first sign of a flaw. Self-compassion is the wise master who sees the beauty, utility, and character in the imperfection. It understands that our cracks are not signs of our worthlessness, but evidence of our life, our journey, our resilience. They are the places where growth can happen, where the flower of wisdom can be planted. They are the very openings through which the light of understanding can enter our hearts. The Japanese art of kintsugi, or golden joinery, embodies this perfectly. When a cherished piece of pottery breaks, it is repaired with a lacquer mixed with powdered gold, silver, or platinum. The philosophy is that the breakage and repair are part of the object's history and should be celebrated rather than concealed. The repaired cracks make the object even more beautiful and precious than it was before. So how do we practice this art of kintsugi on our own hearts? We can begin with simple, concrete actions. The next timmy you hear the voice of your inner critic rising, try the friend test. Pause and ask yourself, what would I say to my dearest friend if they were in this exact situation and felt this way? You would likely offer words of comfort, perspective, and encouragement. You would remind them of their strengths and their fundamental goodness. Now, try to offer those very same words to yourself. You can also develop a set of compassionate phrases to use as a mantra in difficult times. Something as simple as, "This is a moment of suffering. Suffering is a part of life. May I be kind to myself in this moment, and do not underestimate the power of physical touch." Placing a hand over your heart or gently cupping your face during a moment of distress can be a powerful signal to the nervous system. It is a direct, bodily gesture of soothing that can release oxytocin, the hormone of safety and connection, helping to calm the threat response of the inner critic. This practice of self-compassion is not a selfish act. It is the necessary foundation for all true compassion. It is impossible to genuinely accept and care for others if you are in a constant state of war with yourself. A heart that is hardened against itself cannot be truly soft towards others. The judgment you inflict on your own cracks is the same judgment you will, consciously or unconsciously, project onto the imperfections of those around you. But when you learn to hold your own failures and vulnerabilities with tenderness and warmth, your heart naturally softens and opens outward. In accepting your own humanity, you become infinitely more accepting of the flawed, beautiful humanity of everyone you meet. This leads us to a profound and liberating insight. As we practice holding our own struggles with compassion, we touch upon the truth of common humanity. We begin to realize that this feeling of inadequacy, this pain of failure, this fear of not being enough, this is not just my pain, it is human pain. My personal suffering is not a wall that isolates me from others. It is a bridge that connects me to the shared experience of every being who has ever lived. This understanding that our suffering is not a personal failure, but a universal condition is the very doorway to the Buddha's first great teaching on the nature of existence, the reality of dukkha. The practice of self-compassion, of learning to be a friend to ourselves, opens a profound gateway in our understanding. As we hold our own pain with kindness, we begin to notice that the textures of our suffering, fears, our failures, our feelings of inadequacy are not unique to us. We realize that the cracks we find in ourselves are the same cracks that run through the hearts of every human being. This realization that our personal suffering is not a private prison, but a shared human landscape, leads us directly to the cornerstone of the Buddha's teaching, the Four Noble Truths. It is best to approach these truths not as grim, religious dogmas, but as a practical and compassionate medical diagnosis. Imagine you have been feeling unwell for a long time, and you finally go to see a wise and brilliant physician. The doctor's process would follow 4 steps. First, she would diagnose the illness, clearly naming the condition, the first truth. Second, she would identify the cause of the illness, explaining what has led to this condition, the second truth. Third, she would offer a prognosis, telling you that a cure is possible, and describing the state of health you can return to, the third truth. And finally, she would write a prescription, a detailed treatment plan to follow to achieve the cure, the fourth truth. This is precisely the structure of the Four Noble Truths. It is a practical, logical, and ultimately hopeful framework for healing the human mind. We begin with the diagnosis, the first noble truth, the truth of dukkha. This ancient Pali word is most often translated into English as suffering, and this translation has caused a great deal of misunderstanding. When we hear the word suffering, we tend to think only of immense tragedies, war, famine, terminal illness, the death of a loved one. And while dukkha certainly includes these things, this is only its most obvious form. To limit dukkha to major tragedy makes the Buddha's teaching seem pessimistic and disconnected from our ordinary lives. But the meaning of dukkha is far more subtle, pervasive, and intimate. In fact, there are 3 distinct levels of dukkha. The first is dukkha, the suffering of suffering. This is the overt pain we are all familiar with, the physical pain of a headache, a broken bone, or chronic illness, and the emotional pain of grief, loss, fear, and despair. It is the unavoidable pain of birth, old age, sickness, and death. This is the level of dukkha that is easiest to recognize. The second level is viparinama dukkha, the suffering of change. This is a more subtle form of dissatisfaction that arises from the fact that everything is impermanent. Even our moments of happiness are tinged with dukkha, because we know they will not last. Think of a perfect, beautiful vacation. It is a source of joy, but underlying it is the quiet knowledge that it will end. And the bittersweet pain of that ending is a form of dukkha. Getting a long-desired promotion is a happy event, but soon the novelty fades, or we begin to worry about the new responsibilities, or we start aiming for the next promotion. We suffer because we try to cling to pleasant experiences, which, by their very nature, are as fleeting as mist. The third and most profound level is sankhara dukkha, the suffering of conditioned existence. This is the deep background hum of dissatisfaction that is woven into the very fabric of our ordinary, unexamined lives. It is a fundamental sense of restlessness, a feeling that something is not quite right, a subtle but persistent stress that comes from being a separate, vulnerable self in a constantly changing world. It is the anxiety of protecting our ego, the friction of our desires rubbing against reality, the quiet angst of a life lived without a deeper sense of meaning. This is the most important level of dukkha to understand, because it is with us even on our good days. The story of a woman named Kisa Gotami illustrates the journey to understanding this first noble truth with heartbreaking beauty. Kisa Gotami was a young mother whose entire world revolved around her infant son. One day, the child fell ill and died suddenly. Kisa Gotami was completely shattered, consumed by a grief so powerful it tipped into madness. She refused to accept that her son was gone. Clutching his small, lifeless body, she went from house to house in her village, desperately begging everyone she met for a medicine that could bring him back. Her neighbors pitied her, tried to reason with her, or simply shut their doors, believing she had lost her mind. Finally, a wise old man, seeing her unbearable pain, told her, "I do not have the medicine you seek, but I know a man who does. Go and see the Buddha." Kisa Gotami ran to the grove where the Buddha was teaching, laid her son at his feet, and pleaded with him for the miracle cure. The Buddha looked at her with immense compassion. He did not give her a lecture on acceptance or impermanence. He knew her mind was not ready to hear it. Instead, he gave her a task. "I can make the medicine you ask for," he said gently, "but to do so, I need one special ingredient. I need you to bring me a single mustard seed." Kisa Gotami's eyes lit up with hope. "But," the Buddha added, "the seed must come from a house where no one, not a parent, a child, a spouse, or even a Savanthus ever died." Filled with renewed purpose, Kisa Gotami began her quest. She went to the first house, a wealthy mansion. "The Buddha needs a mustard seed to make a medicine for my son," she said. "Can you help me?" "Of course," the woman of the house replied. "We have plenty." But as she was about to hand over the seeds, Kisa Gotami remembered the Buddha's condition. "Has anyone in this house ever died?" she asked. The woman's face fell. "Oh, my dear," she said, "do not remind us of our sorrow. We lost our beloved father just last year." Kisa Gotami went to the next house, and the next, and the next. The story was the same everywhere. "You can have as many mustard seeds as you like, but my husband died in this very room. Please, take a seed, but do not ask about the child we lost to fever." She went to every single house in the village, from the richest to the poorest, and she could not find a single home untouched by death. The people would tell her, "The living are few, but the dead, O Gotami, the dead are many." As twilight fell, she sat by the side of the road, the body of her son still in her lap, and she finally understood. Her own terrible, personal, isolating grief had not disappeared, but it had been transformed. She saw that death was not a unique curse that had fallen upon her family alone. It was the universal law of existence, the shared inheritance of all beings. Her personal tragedy was a single thread in the vast, sorrowful, and beautiful tapestry of life itself. The wall of her isolated pain crumbled, and in its place arose a profound connection to all of humanity. In that moment of awakening, she was no longer alone. She finally understood, and she carefully buried her son, then returned to the Buddha, not for the medicine, but for the truth. This is the liberating power of the first noble truth. It is not a pessimistic decree that life is suffering. It is a compassionate recognition that life includes suffering, and you are not alone in it. The feeling that we are uniquely flawed or cursed is a heavy burden. The truth of dukkha allows us to put that burden down. It is the ultimate statement of our common humanity. It shatters the illusion of isolation. My pain is like your pain. My vulnerability is like your vulnerability. This shared experience is the very foundation of empathy, the soil from which all compassion grows. To bravely face the diagnosis of dukkha is the necessary first step on any authentic path to healing. It is not the final word, but the courageous first one. And having diagnosed the condition, the wise physician naturally turns to the next question: what is its cause? Having made the courageous diagnosis that life, in its unexamined state, contains a pervasive quality of dissatisfaction, or dukkha, we are now ready to follow the wise physician to the next step, identifying the cause. The Buddha did not simply point out the existence of suffering and leave us there. His genius, his profound compassion, lay in his relentless investigation into its origin. He understood that you cannot heal an illness without knowing what causes it. The second noble truth is his definitive discovery. The root cause of our dis-ease, the origin of all our restlessness and sorrow, is a force he called tanha. The ancient Pali word tanha is often translated as craving or desire, but its meaning is closer to thirst. It is not a gentle wish or a simple preference. It is a deep, driving, compulsive thirst. It is the nagging feeling of lack, the inner voice that insists we are incomplete, that we are missing something, and that we must get something from the outside world: an object, a person, an experience, a status in order to be whole and happy. It is the fundamental itch of the human heart. The Buddha identified 3 distinct types of this thirst, which operate in our lives constantly. The first is the most obvious: kama, tanha, the craving for sense pleasures. This is the thirst for things that delight our eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and body. It is the craving for delicious food, beautiful music, luxurious comforts, sexual pleasure, and intoxicating experiences. We chase these things relentlessly, believing that if we can just surround ourselves with enough pleasure, our inner ache will finally go away. The second type is more subtle and deeply tied to our ego: bhavatana, the craving to become. This is the thirst for existence, for status, for identity. It is the craving to be someone, to be successful, to be famous, to be respected, to be loved, to be seen as intelligent or powerful. It is the ego's desperate project to build a solid, permanent, and impressive version of me. This thirst fuels our ambition, our competitiveness, and our endless striving to leave a mark on the world, to prove that we matter. The third type is the most paradoxical: vibhava tanha, the craving for non-existence. This is the thirst to get rid of something unpleasant. It is the fierce aversion we feel towards pain, discomfort, and difficult emotions. It's the desperate wish for a headache to stop, for an annoying person to go away, for a feeling of shame or anxiety to disappear. In its most extreme form, it is the craving for our own annihilation when life feels too painful to bear. It is the energy of pushing away, of saying no to reality. These 3 thirst-pulling pleasant experiences toward us, striving to build ourselves up, and pushing unpleasant experiences away are the engine of our inner turmoil. But the thirst itself is only the spark. The fire of suffering truly ignites with the next step in the process, a step called upadana. Upadana means clinging or attachment, but its literal meaning is fuel. It is the fuel we add to the spark of tanha. It is the mental act of grasping onto the object of our desire and fusing our happiness to it. It is the belief that arises in the mind: I cannot be happy without this, or my life will be ruined if I lose this. The entire process is perfectly captured in a stark and powerful image: a person lost on a raft in the middle of the ocean, dying of thirst. Surrounded by an endless expanse of water, in a moment of desperate delusion, they cup their hands, scoop up the salt water, and drink it. For one fleeting second, the coolness and wetness in their mouth might feel like relief, but immediately, the high concentration of salt hits their system, dehydrating them further and making them even more violently thirsty than before. The very thing they thought would be their salvation becomes a poison that intensifies their affliction. The more they drink, the thirstier they become, driving them to drink more and more in a terrifying downward spiral. This is a perfect metaphor for the trap of tanha. We feel an inner lack, an existential thirst. We try to quench it by drinking the salt water of the world's sensory pleasures, worldly success, fleeting distractions. These things provide a momentary hit of pleasure, a temporary illusion of relief, but they never ever satisfy the underlying thirst. In fact, they exacerbate it. The more we get, the more we want, and the more we fear losing what we have. We are trapped in a vicious feedback loop, driven by a thirst that can never be quenched from the outside. Let's trace this cycle in our daily lives. We feel a flicker of tanha for a new piece of technology. We see the ads, we read the reviews, and the craving grows. We buy the device. For a moment, there is pleasure. But then, upadana, the clinging fuel, is added to the fire. Our happiness becomes attached to this object. We immediately start worrying about it. We buy a protective case. We are anxious about dropping it, scratching it, or losing it. Then, a few months later, a newer, better model is released, and our once treasured object now seems old and inadequate. The pleasure has curdled into anxiety and dissatisfaction. This is the suffering of change, fueled by our initial thirst. Or consider the thirst for non-existence, for aversion. We receive some criticism at work. It's unpleasant. Immediately, vibhavatanya arises. I want this bad feeling to go away. We cling, upadana, to the idea that we can only be okay if this feeling is gone. So we ruminate on the criticism for days. We replay the conversation, we get angry, we fantasize about telling our boss off. Our resistance to the initial unpleasantness becomes a second arrow, as the Buddha called it. The first arrow was the criticism itself, painful, but fleeting. The second arrow is the one we shoot into ourselves, the arrow of our own obsessive resistance, our craving for reality to be different. This second arrow is where the real, prolonged suffering lies. To heal this condition, we must become detectives of our own minds, learning to spot the subtle roots of tanha and upadana in our everyday moments. Notice the automatic, restless urge to reach for your phone the second you feel a moment of boredom. This is a subtle karmatana, a thirst for stimulation. Notice the inner tightening when someone disagrees with your opinion. In a meeting, this is a subtle bhavatana, a thirst to be right, to have your egoic identity validated. Notice the little jolt of pleasure you get from a like on social media and the corresponding pang of disappointment when a post is ignored. This is bhavatana in action. Notice the wave of irritation that washes over you when you are stuck in traffic. This is vibhavatana, the thirst for reality to conform to your schedule. These 1,000 tiny thirsts, these small acts of mental clenching, are the microcosm of our larger suffering. They are the individual saltwater sips that keep us in a chronic state of dehydration. The diagnosis is now complete. We have identified the pervasive illness of dukkha, the background dissatisfaction of life, and we have uncovered its root cause, the insatiable thirst of tanha, which we fuel with the clinging of upadana. A lesser physician might stop here and leave us with this grim assessment. But the Buddha was the great physician. He did not present this diagnosis as a final condemnation, but as a necessary step toward liberation. Because once you know the precise cause of an illness, you can remove it. And that is exactly where his teaching leads us next. Having identified the cause of our suffering, he now offers the breathtaking prognosis. A cure is possible. This is the promise of the third noble truth, the cessation of thirst, and the profound, unshakable peace of nirvana. Having courageously looked at our shared human condition of dissatisfaction, dukkha, and having identified its root cause as the insatiable thirst of craving, or tanha, we might feel a sense of unease. The diagnosis is clear, the cause identified. But what now? Are we simply left with this grim knowledge, destined to be thirsty forever? A lesser philosophy might stop here, but the Buddha was known as the great physician, and no good physician delivers a diagnosis and a cause without also offering a prognosis. The third noble truth is that breathtaking prognosis. A cure exists. The cessation of suffering is possible. This state of ultimate health, freedom, and peace is known as nirvana. Perhaps no word in all of Eastern philosophy has been more misunderstood in the West than nirvana. Our minds, conditioned by our own cultural stories, immediately try to place it within a familiar box. We might imagine it as a kind of Buddhist heaven, a lush garden, a celestial paradise with clouds and angels, a reward we receive after a virtuous life. Or, influenced by a different kind of skepticism, we might interpret it as a terrifying state of utter annihilation, a blank nothingness, the complete extinction of the self. Both of these interpretations are profoundly mistaken. The Buddha was clear. Nirvana is not a place you go to, and it is not a state of non-existence. It is a state of mind, a psychological reality that can be experienced right here, in this very life. The clearest way to understand nirvana is through the word itself. The Sanskrit word nirvana is a beautiful and practical metaphor. It is composed of the prefix nir, meaning to extinguish or to blow out, and the root vana, which means wind, or, by extension, craving. So, the literal meaning of nirvana is the blowing out or extinguishing of a flame. But what is being extinguished? It is the three fires that fuel all our suffering, the fires that provide the heat for the thirst of tanha. These are known in Buddhism as the three poisons. The first is the fire of greed, or lobha. This is the fire of craving, lust, and attachment. It is the relentless pulling toward energy, the constant wanting of more pleasure, more possessions, more validation. The second is the fire of hatred, or aversion, dosa. This is the fire of anger, fear, and ill will. It is the aggressive pushing away energy, the constant resistance to people, situations, and feelings we find unpleasant. The third, and most fundamental, is the fire of delusion or ignorance, moha. This is the deep, underlying confusion about the nature of reality. It is the ignorance of seeing ourselves as a solid, separate, permanent ego, and the failure to understand the truths of impermanence and interconnectedness. This fire of delusion is the primary fuel that feeds the other two. Nirvana, then, is the state of mind that is experienced when these three fires have been completely extinguished. It is not the destruction of the person. It is the destruction of the poisons that afflict the person. Imagine a simple oil lamp. The lamp has a wick and a bowl filled with oil. When the wick is lit, the lamp produces a flame. In this analogy, the flickering, agitated, and consuming flame is dukkha, stress, anxiety, and dissatisfaction of our lives. The oil in the lamp is the fuel, the greed, hatred, and ignorance we carry. As long as there is oil in the lamp, the flame will continue to burn. Our spiritual practice, the practice of mindfulness, compassion, and wisdom is the process of consciously stopping the act of pouring more oil into the lamp. We learn to stop feeding our greed. We learn to stop reacting with aversion. We work to clear away our delusions. What happens when the existing oil in the lamp has finally been consumed and we have stopped adding any more? We do not have to attack the flame. We do not need to violently stomp it out. The flame, deprived of its fuel, will naturally and gently flicker, diminish, and go out all on its own. This going out is nirvana, and what is left is there nothing, number. The lamp itself remains in its natural, cool, and peaceful state. The darkness that results is not a negative void, but a serene and profound stillness. Nirvana is this natural peace, this inherent clarity of the mind that is revealed when the fires of agitation have ceased. It is not a state that we must construct or create. It is our original nature, which we uncover by removing the defilements that obscure it. While this ultimate state is a profound attainment, its qualities can be pointed to with words. It is described as the supreme peace, unshakable tranquility that is no longer dependent on the ever-changing conditions of the external world. It is the peace of the deep ocean, which remains perfectly still even while a storm rages on the surface. It is ultimate freedom. Freedom from the compulsive push and pull of craving and aversion. Freedom from the exhausting work of defending and promoting the ego. Freedom from what is known as samsarathi, endless cycle of birth and death. This can be understood psychologically as freedom from the moment-to-moment cycle of hope and fear, rising and falling, pleasure and pain, that characterizes our unexamined existence. It is a state of unconditional well-being. The Pali word for this is sukha. This is not the fleeting, giddy happiness that comes from getting something we want. It is a deep, abiding, and radiant sense of wellness and contentment that is independent of any external cause. It is the simple joy of being, free from the thirst for becoming. And finally, it is perfect clarity. When the fire of delusion is extinguished, we see reality with a stunning and unfiltered clarity. We see things just as they are, free from the projections, distortions, and fears of our own ego. It is essential to remember that this is not some far-off, unattainable dream. Nirvana is not just the end point of the path. Its peace can be tasted in moments, right now. Every Timmy you consciously let go of a small resentment instead of feeding it, you taste nirvana. Every Timmy you meet a moment of anxiety with a calm breath instead of being swept away by it, you taste nirvana. Every Timmy you rest in the simple presence of this moment, without wanting anything to be different, you are experiencing a flicker of this profound peace. It is the stillness after the storm has passed. It is the silence after a loud noise has ceased. It is the coolness after a fever has broken. The goal of the path is to cultivate these moments, to expand them, until that peace and freedom become the very baseline of our being. We have now completed the first 3 parts of the wise physician's consultation. The illness has been diagnosed. Dukkha, the root cause, has been identified. Tana, and the hopeful prognosis has been declared. A complete cure is possible, a state of perfect well-being called nirvana. This naturally brings us to the final, most crucial stage of the process. If nirvana is the destination, the state of perfect health we are aiming for, what is the prescription? What is the detailed, practical, step-by-step treatment plan that we must follow to walk the path from suffering to freedom? This is the 4th noble truth, the compassionate and practical roadmap to liberation known as the Noble Eightfold Path. We have now traveled through the first 3 of the 4 noble truths, following the path of a wise physician. We have received the diagnosis of our shared condition, dukkha. We have understood its root cause, the insatiable thirst of tanha, and we have been given the hopeful prognosis that a complete cure is possible, the profound peace of nirvana. This brings us to the final and most essential part of the consultation, the prescription. The Buddha did not merely describe the destination of peace, he provided a clear, detailed, and practical map to get there. This map, this comprehensive guide for living, is the 4th noble truth, the Noble Eightfold Path. It is vital to understand that this is not a set of 10 commandments or a list of rigid rules to be obeyed out of fear or blind faith. It is a path to be walked, a set of skills to be cultivated, a way of life to be embodied. The Buddha himself arrived at this path after years of intense experimentation. As a young prince, he had explored the extreme of hedonism, indulging in every conceivable sensory pleasure, only to find it empty, fleeting, and ultimately unsatisfying. Later, as a wandering ascetic, he explored the opposite extreme of severe self-mortification, punishing his body through starvation and painful austerities, only to find that a weakened body leads to a weakened mind, incapable of achieving true wisdom. The Noble Eightfold Path is the middle way he discovered between these 2 unproductive extremes. It is a path of profound balance, of sane and intelligent living that avoids the traps of both self-indulgence and self-denial. It is the way to live in this world with grace, clarity, and purpose. Perhaps the best way to visualize the path is to imagine yourself standing on the bank of a wide, turbulent river. This shore where you stand is the realm of samsara, ordinary world of confusion, reactivity, suffering, and the endless cycle of hope and fear. The other shore, visible in the distance, is calm, beautiful, and radiant. That is the shore of nirvana, of liberation and peace. The river between is wide, and the current is strong. There is no bridge. How do you cross? The Noble Eightfold Path is the raft that the Buddha teaches us how to build. It is a sturdy, reliable vessel constructed of 8 strong logs, all tightly bound together. Each log is an essential component of the path. If one is missing, or weak, the raft will be unstable and may be swamped by the currents of life. But when all 8 are cultivated together, they form a vessel capable of carrying us safely across the waters of suffering to the other shore. These 8 components of the path are traditionally organized into 3 interconnected groups. The first group is wisdom, or panya. This is the rudder and the map for our raft, giving us direction and clarity. It consists of 2 limbs. 1. Right view, samadhi. This is the foundation of the entire path. It means seeing reality as it truly is, not as we wish it to be. It is the clear understanding of the 4 noble truths themselves, understanding the nature of our dissatisfaction, its cause, the possibility of its end, and the path to that end. 2. Right intention, samasankappa. This is the purification of our motivation. It means consciously cultivating intentions of letting go, of goodwill and harmlessness towards all beings, and of compassion. It is aligning the energy of our heart and mind with the goal of awakening. The second group is ethical conduct, or sila. This is the very hull of our raft, the solid, stable foundation that keeps us buoyant and prevents us from taking on water. It is about how we skillfully conduct ourselves in the world. It consists of 3 limbs. 3. Right speech, sama vacha. This means speaking in ways that are truthful, kind, helpful, and harmonious. It is the training to abstain from lying, divisive speech that sets people against each other, harsh or abusive speech, and idle gossip that wastes our own tim and the tim of others. 4. Right action, samakamanta. This is the practice of acting in ways that do not cause harm. It is founded on the principle of non-violence and includes abstaining from killing, stealing, and engaging in sexual conduct that is harmful to ourselves or others. Wu, right livelihood, sama ajiva. This is the practice of earning a living in a profession that is honorable and does not cause harm to other beings or to society. It means avoiding work that involves deception, exploitation, or dealing in weapons, intoxicants, or poisons. The third and final group is mental discipline, or samadhi. This is the mast and the sail of our raft, the inner training that propels us across the river. It consists of 3 limbs. Luke, right effort, samavayama. This is the energetic and joyful practice of cultivating a wholesome mind. It involves 4 great efforts: preventing unskillful thoughts from arising, abandoning them if they have arisen, cultivating skillful and positive thoughts, and maintaining those that have already arisen. 7. Right mindfulness, samasati. This is the heart of the meditative practice. It is the skill of maintaining a balanced, moment-to-moment awareness of our own reality. It means paying careful attention to our body, our feelings, our mind states, and the fundamental principles of reality, without being lost in judgment or distraction. 8. Right concentration, sama samadhi. This is the practice of developing a calm, stable, and one-pointed mind. It is the ability to unify and focus our mental energy, transforming the mind from a scattered and restless force into a powerful tool of insight and investigation. It is crucial to see that these 8 limbs are not a linear sequence of steps to be mastered one after another. They are all interconnected, and they must all be cultivated simultaneously. They are like the individual strands of a single strong rope. Each strand supports and strengthens all the others. For example, your practice of right speech, sila, becomes much easier when you have right mindfulness, samadhi, to notice the impulse to speak harshly before you act on it. Your practice of right mindfulness is guided by right view, panya, which tells you what is important to pay attention to. The whole path functions as a beautiful, integrated system for human flourishing. The Buddha's invitation for this path was never one of blind obedience. He did not say, "Believe this because I said so." His constant refrain was, "Ehi passiko," a Pali phrase that means, "Come and see for yourself." The Eightfold Path is an experiential journey. It is a set of training principles to be applied to your own life. The proof is not in a sacred text, but in your own experience. Does living this way lead to less suffering? Does it lead to more peace, more clarity, more compassion? This is the pragmatic, scientific spirit of the path. A complete exploration of all 8 of these rich and profound limbs would be a lifetime's journey. For our purpose here, we will not attempt to examine each one in detail. Instead, we will focus on the one that is considered the forerunner of the path, the very compass that sets the direction for our raft, right view. Without a correct map, without a clear understanding of the terrain, all our efforts can lead us astray. Right view provides that map. It illuminates the entire journey, and the essence of this wise view lies in learning to see the world and ourselves through the lens of its 3 most fundamental characteristics, its 3 marks of existence. The Noble Eightfold Path is our raft, the sturdy vessel designed to carry us across the river of suffering to the shore of peace. The rudder that steers this raft, the compass that ensures we are always heading in the right direction, is the very first limb of the path, right view. Right view is not about adopting a new set of beliefs or dogmas. It is about cultivating a new way of seeing. It is the practice of looking at reality with clear, honest, and courageous eyes, free from the distortions of our fears and desires. The essence of this clear seeing lies in recognizing 3 fundamental characteristics, or marks, that are stamped upon every aspect of our conditioned existence, from the life of a distant star to the fleeting thoughts in our own minds. These are the 3 marks of existence: impermanence, anicca; unsatisfactoriness, dukkha; and not, self, anatta. The first mark is impermanence, or anicca. This is the truth that everything is in a constant state of flux. Nothing is static, nothing is permanent. The mountains are slowly being weathered by the wind and rain. The seasons turn. Our bodies grow, age, and change with every passing moment. Our thoughts, feelings, and moods are a ceaseless, flowing river. We live in a universe that is defined by change. Most of our suffering does not come from the fact of change itself, but from our profound resistance to it. We try to grasp onto pleasant experiences, desperately hoping to make them permanent. We cling to youth and health, denying the reality of aging and sickness. We build our lives as if they are solid, permanent structures, and then we are shattered when the inevitable winds of change blow. The wisdom of right view is to stop fighting this fundamental law of the universe. To embrace impermanence is not to become cynical or detached. On the contrary, it allows us to love more deeply, to appreciate more fully, and to live more vibrantly, because we know that this moment, this person, this experience is precious precisely because it is fleeting. The second mark is unsatisfactoriness, or dukkha. As we have seen, this is the diagnosis at the heart of the first noble truth. Right view means seeing this characteristic clearly, not just in our moments of overt pain, but in the very nature of conditioned experience. Because everything is impermanent, anicca, relying on any conditioned thing for deep, lasting, and ultimate happiness is bound to lead to dissatisfaction, dukkha. The pleasure of a good meal ends. The excitement of a new achievement fades. The things we love will change or pass away. Seeing this is not pessimistic, it is realistic. It weans us off our addiction to chasing fleeting pleasures and turns our attention inward, towards a source of peace that is not dependent on the unreliable and ever-changing conditions of the outside world. The third mark is the most profound, the most challenging to our ordinary way of thinking, and ultimately, the most liberating. It is the truth of not self, or anatta. From the moment we are born, we operate under a powerful, intuitive assumption that inside this body and mind, there is a solid, continuous, and independent me. We believe there is a permanent self who is the thinker of our thoughts, the feeler of our feelings, and the director of our lives. We take this I to be the absolute core of our being. The wisdom of anatta asks us to investigate this assumption directly. When we do, we find something astonishing. The Buddha analyzed the human being not as a solid entity, but as a dynamic process, a flowing confluence of 5 interconnected aspects, which he called the 5 aggregates, or 5 heaps. These are, first, the physical form of the body; second, the raw feelings or sensations that arise, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral; third, our perceptions which label and recognize these feelings and forms; fourth, our mental formations, which include all our habits, intentions, biases, and thoughts. And fifth, the underlying faculty of consciousness itself, the basic awareness that knows the other four are present. The teaching of anatta is this: if you look closely at each of these five components, you will not find a separate, continuous I anywhere. The body is changing, feelings come and go, perceptions shift, thoughts arise and pass away. Consciousness flickers from object to object. The self is not a static thing to be found. It is a verb, a process. It is the dynamic, interdependent dance of these five changing processes. The I is a convenient label, a useful convention for navigating the world, but it does not refer to a fixed, independent entity. The classic story used to illustrate this is the encounter between the Buddhist sage Nagasena and the Greek king Melinda. King Melinda was a formidable scholar and debater, and he sought to challenge Nagasena on this very point. After some preliminary discussion, the king asked, "What, venerable sir, is your name?" Nagasena replied that he was known as Nagasena, but that this was merely a name, a designation, and that no permanent person could be found. The king, delighted, believed he had found a flaw in the teaching. "If there is no person," he challenged, "then who is it that I am speaking to? Who wears these robes? Who eats and sleeps?" He then began to deconstruct the sage. "Is your hair Nagasena?" "No, your majesty." "Are your feelings Nagasena, your thoughts?" "No, your majesty." Having cornered the sage, the king sat back triumphantly. But Nagasena then reversed the inquiry. "Your majesty, you are a king. You must have traveled here in a royal chariot. Please, describe it to me." "Of course," said the king. Nagasena then began to deconstruct the chariot. "Is the wheel the chariot?" "No, venerable sir." "Is the axle the chariot? The frame? The yoke?" To each question, the king had to answer no. Then, Nagasena pressed, "Is the chariot simply all of these parts put together?" "Yes," the king agreed. "But," Nagasena said, "if we take all the parts of the chariot and lay them out on the ground, where is the chariot then?" Is the word chariot anything more than a convenient name we give to this particular assembly of parts when they are arranged in this specific way? The king, a wise and honest man, was silent for a moment and then smiled. He understood. Chariot is a conventional truth, a useful label, but it has no ultimate, independent existence apart from its constituent parts. Nagasena explained that Nagasena is exactly the same. It is a convenient name for the temporary arrangement of the body, feelings, perceptions, thoughts, and consciousness. This insight is not a dry, intellectual exercise. It is the key that unlocks the deepest prison of the ego. If there is no solid, permanent self to defend, then what is the point of all our anxiety about our reputation? If there is no separate self to aggrandize, what is the purpose of arrogance and pride? If the boundary between me and you is ultimately a conceptual illusion, then what is the basis for jealousy, envy, and hatred? Seeing through the illusion of the separate self reveals our profound interconnectedness with all of life. It frees us from the burden of having to be a somebody, allowing us to simply be. It is not a denial of our individuality, but an awakening to our universality. This liberating wisdom of not self, or anatta, is the pinnacle of right view. It cuts the very root of our clinging, which is the clinging to a me and mine, but it can feel very abstract. How does such a high-level, philosophical view help us navigate the messy, everyday world? A world that seems to be built on the very idea of separate selves. A world that constantly invites us into the painful game of comparison, competition, and judgment. Understanding that the self we are trying to promote and compare is an illusion is the first step to gracefully bowing out of this game altogether. The Noble Eightfold Path is our raft, the sturdy vessel designed to carry us across the river of suffering to the shore of peace. The rudder that steers this raft, the compass that ensures we are always heading in the right direction, is the very first limb of the path. Right view. Right view is not about adopting a new set of beliefs or dogmas. It is about cultivating a new way of seeing. It is the practice of looking at reality with clear, honest, and courageous eyes, free from the distortions of our fears and desires. The essence of this clear seeing lies in recognizing three fundamental characteristics, or marks, that are stamped upon every aspect of our conditioned existence, from the life of a distant star to the fleeting thoughts in our own minds. These are the three marks of existence: impermanence, anicca, unsatisfactoriness, dukkha, and not, self, anatta. The first mark is impermanence, or anicca. This is the truth that everything is in a constant state of flux. Nothing is static, nothing is permanent. The mountains are slowly being weathered by the wind and rain. The seasons turn, our bodies grow, age, and change with every passing moment. Our thoughts, feelings, and moods are a ceaseless, flowing river. We live in a universe that is defined by change. Most of our suffering does not come from the fact of change itself, but from our profound resistance to it. We try to grasp onto pleasant experiences, desperately hoping to make them permanent. We cling to youth and health, denying the reality of aging and sickness. We build our lives as if they are solid, permanent structures, and then we are shattered when the inevitable winds of change blow. The wisdom of right view is to stop fighting this fundamental law of the universe. To embrace impermanence is not to become cynical or detached. On the contrary, it allows us to love more deeply, to appreciate more fully, and to live more vibrantly, because we know that this moment, this person, this experience is precious precisely because it is fleeting. The second mark is unsatisfactoriness, or dukkha. As we have seen, this is the diagnosis at the heart of the first noble truth. Right view means seeing this characteristic clearly, not just in our moments of overt pain, but in the very nature of conditioned experience. Because everything is impermanent, anicca, relying on any conditioned thing for deep, lasting, and ultimate happiness is bound to lead to dissatisfaction, dukkha. The pleasure of a good meal ends. The excitement of a new achievement fades. The things we love will change or pass away. Seeing this is not pessimistic, it is realistic. It weans us off our addiction to chasing fleeting pleasures and turns our attention inward towards a source of peace that is not dependent on the unreliable and ever-changing conditions of the outside world. The third mark is the most profound, the most challenging to our ordinary way of thinking, and ultimately, the most liberating. It is the truth of not self, or anatta. From the moment we are born, we operate under a powerful, intuitive assumption that inside this body and mind, there is a solid, continuous, and independent me. We believe there is a permanent self who is the thinker of our thoughts, the feeler of our feelings, and the director of our lives. We take this I to be the absolute core of our being. The wisdom of anatta asks us to investigate this assumption directly. When we do, we find something astonishing. The Buddha analyzed the human being not as a solid entity, but as a dynamic process, a flowing confluence of 5 interconnected aspects, which he called the 5 aggregates, or 5 heaps. These are, first, the physical form of the body; second, the raw feelings or sensations that arise, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral; third, our perceptions which label and recognize these feelings and forms; fourth, our mental formations, which include all our habits, intentions, biases, and thoughts; and fifth, the underlying faculty of consciousness itself, the basic awareness that knows the other 4 are present. The teaching of anatta is this: if you look closely at each of these 5 components, you will not find a separate, continuous I anywhere. The body is changing, feelings come and go, perceptions shift, thoughts arise and pass away, consciousness flickers from object to object. The self is not a static thing to be found. It is a verb, a process. It is the dynamic, interdependent dance of these 5 changing processes. The I is a convenient label, a useful convention for navigating the world, but it does not refer to a fixed, independent entity. The classic story used to illustrate this is the encounter between the Buddhist sage Nagasena and the Greek king Melinda. King Melinda was a formidable scholar and debater, and he sought to challenge Nagasena on this very point. After some preliminary discussion, the king asked, "What, venerable sir, is your name?" Nagasena replied that he was known as Nagasena, but that this was merely a name, a designation. and that no permanent person could be found. The king, delighted, believed he had found a flaw in the teaching. If there is no person, he challenged, then who is it that I am speaking to? Who wears these robes? Who eats and sleeps? He then began to deconstruct the sage. Is your hair Nagasena? No, your majesty. Are your feelings Nagasena? Your thoughts? No, your majesty. Having cornered the sage, the king sat back triumphantly. But Nagasena then reversed the inquiry. Your majesty, you are a king. You must have traveled here in a royal chariot. Please, describe it to me. Of course, said the king. Nagasena then began to deconstruct the chariot. Is the wheel the chariot? No, venerable sir. Is the axle the chariot? The frame? The yoke? To each question, the king had to answer no. Then, Nagasena pressed, is the chariot simply all of these parts put together? Yes, the king agreed. But, Nagasena said, if we take all the parts of the chariot and lay them out on the ground, where is the chariot then? Is the word chariot anything more than a convenient name we give to this particular assembly of parts when they are arranged in this specific way? The king, a wise and honest man, was silent for a moment and then smiled. He understood. Chariot is a conventional truth, a useful label, but it has no ultimate, independent existence apart from its constituent parts. Nagasena explained that Nagasena is exactly the same. It is a convenient name for the temporary arrangement of the body, feelings, perceptions, thoughts, and consciousness. This insight is not a dry intellectual exercise. It is the key that unlocks the deepest prison of the ego. If there is no solid, permanent self to defend, then what is the point of all our anxiety about our reputation? If there is no separate self to aggrandize, what is the purpose of arrogance and pride? If the boundary between me and you is ultimately a conceptual illusion, then what is the basis for jealousy, envy, and hatred? Seeing through the illusion of the separate self reveals our profound interconnectedness with all of life. It frees us from the burden of having to be a somebody, allowing us to simply be. It is not a denial of our individuality, but an awakening to our universality. This liberating wisdom of not-self, or anatta, is the pinnacle of right view. It cuts the very root of our clinging, which is the clinging to a me and mine, but it can feel very abstract. How does such a high-level, philosophical view help us navigate the messy, everyday world? A world that seems to be built on the very idea of separate selves. A world that constantly invites us into the painful game of comparison, competition, and judgment. Understanding that the self we are trying to promote and compare is an illusion is the first step to gracefully bowing out of this game altogether. Having seen how the wisdom of not-self can free us from the inner trap of comparison, we can now turn our attention to its external counterpart, the pervasive, modern-day promise that happiness can be bought. We are immersed in a culture that endlessly whispers and often shouts that the cure for our inner discontent can be found in the next purchase. A bigger house, a faster car, a more fashionable wardrobe, the latest smartphone. These are presented to us not merely as objects, but as keys to a better life, as tangible solutions to our intangible feelings of lack. This relentless pursuit of happiness through acquisition is a powerful and seductive form of tanha, the thirst that the Buddha identified as the root of our suffering. The fundamental problem with this approach is that it is a lie. It is a race with no finish line. Psychologists call this the hedonic treadmill. When we finally get the thing we have been craving, there is often a temporary spike in our happiness, but this feeling is fleeting. Very quickly, we adapt. The new car becomes simply the car. The initial thrill fades, and our new higher level of material comfort becomes our new normal. Yet, the underlying thirst, the habit of seeking happiness from the outside, remains. And so, we fix our desire on the next thing, believing that this timid will provide lasting satisfaction. We are like the person on the raft, drinking salt water to quench their thirst. The pursuit of external wealth, when driven by an inner poverty, only deepens our sense of lack. It is a bottomless pit that consumes our time, our energy, and our peace, often leaving us in debt and feeling more anxious than when we started. The Zen path offers a radical and liberating alternative to this treadmill. It is the wisdom of Dukkha Tri Tuk, a Vietnamese phrase that beautifully captures two related concepts. Dukkha means few desires. It is the intentional simplification of our wants. Tri Tuk means knowing what is enough. It is the cultivation of a deep, inner sense of contentment. Together, they represent a profound shift in our understanding of wealth. It is crucial to understand that this is not a vow of poverty or a rejection of basic comfort. The Buddha's middle way explicitly avoids the extreme of painful asceticism. This is not about self-deprivation. It is about self-liberation. It is the discovery that true contentment is an inner state, not an external acquisition. It is the freedom from the exhausting, agitating, and endless thirst for more. It is the cultivation of an inner wealth that is immune to stock market crashes and changing fashions. There is a legendary encounter from ancient Greece that powerfully illustrates this contrast between outer power and inner wealth. The two figures are a study in opposites. The first is Alexander the Great, the emperor who, by his early 30s, had conquered most of the known world. He was the wealthiest, most powerful man alive, the very embodiment of worldly success. The second is Diogenes the Cynic, a philosopher who had renounced all possessions and societal conventions. He owned nothing but a simple cloak, a wooden bowl, and a lamp he was said to carry in daylight, looking for an honest man. He lived in a large, overturned ceramic jar in the marketplace of Corinth. Alexander, intrigued by tales of this strange and brilliant man, sought him out. He arrived with his magnificent retinue of generals and guards, a spectacle of power and wealth. He found Diogenes relaxing in his barrel, enjoying the warmth of the morning sun. Alexander the Great stood before the man who owned nothing. After a moment, the emperor, perhaps amused, perhaps genuinely curious, made an offer of immense power. "I am Alexander the Great," he said. "Ask of me any favor you wish." He was offering this man literally anything in the world: a palace, gold, an entire province to govern. Diogenes didn't steer. He simply squinted up at the great emperor and his entourage, who were casting a large shadow over him. "Yes," Diogenes replied, "there is one thing you can do for me. Stand a little to one side. You are blocking my sunlight." This exchange is breathtaking in its simplicity and depth. Alexander represents the peak of Tanha's Promishi, has acquired everything the world has to offer, and yet he is still restless, still seeking. Diogenes represents the radical freedom of Tri Tuk, of knowing what is enough. His sense of well-being was so complete, so self-contained, that it depended on nothing external. The most powerful man in the world could offer him nothing, because he wanted nothing. The only thing the emperor could do for him was to stop taking something away: the simple, free, and abundant pleasure of the sun on his skin. The story asks us a profound question. Who was the richer man? The one who had the whole world but was still seeking, or the one who had nothing but was completely content? True wealth, it suggests, is not in having much, but in wanting little. This ancient wisdom is finding a powerful new expression in the modern movement of minimalism. At its best, minimalism is not just a stark aesthetic of white walls and empty rooms. It is a conscious lifestyle choice, a practical application of Dukkha Tri Tuk. Minimalists are actively questioning the core promise of consumerism. They are choosing to intentionally live only with the things they truly need or deeply love. In doing so, they are discovering the same freedoms that Diogenes embodied. They find freedom from the burden of debt that so often accompanies a materialistic lifestyle. They reclaim their timmy and energy, no longer needing to spend their weekends maintaining, organizing, and cleaning a mountain of possessions. And most importantly, they discover a profound sense of mental peace. A decluttered home often leads to a decluttered mind. With less external noise and distraction, there is more space for internal quiet and calm. Ultimately, the purpose of simplifying our external lives is to simplify our minds. When we are not constantly chasing the next purchase, comparing our possessions to our neighbors, or working to pay off the things we thought would make us happy, our attention is liberated. We can finally begin to appreciate the simple, abundant, and completely free pleasures that are always available to us. The taste of a fresh glass of water, the beauty of a sunset, the sound of birdsong, the feeling of our own breath moving in and out of our body. This is the unshakable inner wealth that Diogenes possessed in his barrel. It is a wealth that can never be bought and can never be taken away. This practice of cultivating simplicity and inner contentment frees up our most precious and non-renewable resources, our time, our energy, and our attention. When we are no longer heavily invested in the acquisition of things, we can begin to invest our lives in what truly creates lasting meaning and happiness. We can invest in our own growth, our creativity, and, most importantly, in the quality and depth of our relationships with others. This leads us from the wisdom of how to relate to our things, to the wisdom of how to relate to each other, through the transformative Zen arts of deep listening and loving speech. Having cultivated a simpler life, free from the traps of comparison and materialism, we find ourselves with a new kind of wealth, a wealth of time, energy, and attention. The Zen path teaches us that the highest and best use of this wealth is to invest it in the quality of our connections with others. Our relationships are often the source of our greatest joys and our deepest sorrows. The principles of mindfulness, when applied to the way we communicate, can transform these relationships from battlegrounds of the ego into sanctuaries of understanding and mutual support. This practice begins with the third limb of the Noble Eightfold Path, right speech. In our modern world, we are often careless with our words. We speak impulsively, reactively, and without full awareness of the impact our speech has on others. We listen, not with the intent to understand, but with the intent to formulate our reply, to win the argument, to assert our correctness. A conversation ceases to be a meeting of two hearts and becomes a duel between two egos. Right speech, however, is a profound practice of ethical and mindful communication. It is not merely a list of prohibitions, but a conscious training in using our words as a force for healing and connection in the world. The practice is traditionally defined by 4 guidelines. First, we train ourselves to speak the truth and to abstain from lying and deception. Second, we train ourselves to avoid divisive speech, avoid slander, backbiting, and gossip that creates discord and sets people against one another. Instead, we use our words to mend rifts and encourage harmony. Third, we train ourselves to abstain from harsh speech. We let go of words spoken in anger, of insults, abuse, and sarcasm intended to wound. Instead, we cultivate a way of speaking that is gentle, kind, and respectful, even when we must disagree. And fourth, we train ourselves to avoid idle, pointless talk that wastes our time and energy and creates more noise in the world. We learn to speak with a clear purpose, at the right timmy, offering words that are useful and beneficial. This framework of right speech is beautifully complemented by 2 practices made central by the teachings of Thich Nhat Hanh: deep listening and loving speech. Deep listening is a radical act of compassion. It is the practice of listening with only one intention: to offer the other person a space where they can empty their heart and suffer less. To practice deep listening, we must set aside our own agenda. We put down our opinions, our judgments, our own life story, and our desperate need to offer advice or find a solution. We simply offer the other person the rare and precious gift of our full, unwavering, and non-judgmental presence. We listen not just with our ears, but with our entire being. We listen for the feeling behind the words. We listen for the pain, the unmet needs, and the hidden vulnerability. We trust that the simple act of being heard in this way is a powerful form of healing. For many people, it may be the first time in their lives that they have felt truly seen and understood without judgment. The counterpart to deep listening is loving speech. If listening is the compassionate receiving, speaking is the compassionate giving. Loving speech is the intentional use of words to nourish, comfort, inspire, and heal. It is speaking with a clear awareness of our own state of mind and the state of mind of the person we are speaking to. It can take many forms. A word of sincere praise or appreciation, which can give someone strength for a whole day. An honest apology, offered without excuses, which can mend a broken connection. A calm and clear expression of our own feelings and needs, using I statements rather than blaming you statements. Loving speech is the understanding that our words can be either weapons or medicine, and consciously choosing to use them as medicine. There is a charming Zen story that illustrates the transformative power of these practices. A husband and wife came to a Zen master, their faces etched with bitterness and unhappiness. "Master," they said, "we love each other, but we cannot stop fighting. Every day is a battle of harsh words. We interrupt each other, we blame each other, and we never feel heard. We are on the brink of separating." The master listened quietly. He then went into another room and returned with a small jug of water. "This is magic water," he told them. "I will give you the secret to saving your relationship. Go home." And the next time an argument begins to brew, whichever one of you is listening must immediately take a large mouthful of this water. You must hold it in your mouth without swallowing or spitting it out until the other person has completely finished speaking everything they wish to say. The couple, though highly skeptical, agreed to try. The next evening, the husband became angry about some small matter and began to speak with a raised voice. The wife, remembering the master's instruction, ran to the jug and took a large gulp of water. Her mouth now full, she was physically incapable of her usual response, interrupting, defending herself, or counterattacking. All she could do was stand there and listen. The husband, for the first time, was able to speak his mind without interruption. He spoke, and without the fuel of his wife's reactivity, his anger eventually just ran out of steam. He grew quiet. Later that night, the wife had a grievance of her own. As she began to speak, the husband took his turn with the magic water. He was forced to listen to her entire perspective, from beginning to end. He heard a depth of feeling in her that he had never had the patience to listen to before. They continued this practice for a week. The constant bickering that had defined their marriage simply vanished. They returned to the master, their faces transformed with a newfound gentleness. "Master, your magic water has saved us," they exclaimed. "Please, we need more." The master smiled. "The jug contains only plain spring water," he said. "The magic was not in the water. The magic was in your listening." This story reveals the simple, profound truth at the heart of our relational suffering. The magic water is a tool for practicing mindfulness. It physically enforces a pause, breaking the cycle of unconscious reactivity. In that pause, listening becomes possible. And in that listening, understanding is born. We discover that most conflict is not about the content of the argument, but about the desperate, unmet need of both parties to feel heard and respected. When we offer the gift of our silent, compassionate presence, we are offering the very medicine the other person's heart is crying out for. As we cultivate these skills, as we learn to speak with more kindness and listen with more depth, something remarkable begins to happen. The practice starts to change not just our one-on-one relationships, but our entire perception of the world. We begin to see, in a direct and visceral way, that we are not the isolated, independent selves we once imagined. We see how our words and actions create ripples that affect everyone around us. We feel how another person's suffering can touch our own heart, and how our compassion can ease their burden. This growing, intuitive understanding of our profound interconnectedness prepares us to explore two of the most sublime and unifying truths in all of Buddhist philosophy: the wisdom of emptiness and the reality of interbeing. Our journey inward, from the personal to the interpersonal, has shown us how the principles of mindfulness can heal our relationship with ourselves and with others. As we practice these arts of compassion and communication, our perception begins to shift in a fundamental way. We start to see, not just as an idea, but as a direct experience, that the rigid boundaries we once drew between me and you, and between me and the world, are far more porous and illusory than we ever imagined. This dawning realization is a gateway to two of the most sublime and transformative insights of the Zen and Mahayana Buddhist traditions: the wisdom of emptiness, or sunyata, and its beautiful, heart-opening expression, the reality of interbeing. The word emptiness can, at first, sound frightening or nihilistic to the Western ear. It might conjure images of a cold, meaningless void, a black hole where everything disappears into nothingness. It is essential to understand that this is not what Buddhist emptiness means. Sunyata does not mean non-existence. It means empty of a separate, independent, and intrinsic self. It is the understanding that no thing, no person, no phenomenon exists on its own, from its own side, isolated from everything else. Everything arises in dependence upon a vast web of causes and conditions. Remember the chariot of King Milinda? When we took it apart, we could not find an essential chariotness in any of its pieces. The word chariot was a convenient label for a temporary assembly of non-chariot parts. In the same way, a flower is empty of a separate flowerness. It is made of non-flower elements, sunshine, rain, soil, air, and timmy. If you remove any of these elements, the flower cannot be. The wisdom of emptiness reveals that the entire universe functions this way. Everything is empty of a separate self, because everything is full of everything else. The Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh coined a beautiful term to make this profound wisdom accessible and to emphasize its positive and relational nature: interbeing. Interbeing is the factual, descriptive reality that flows directly from the insight of emptiness. It means that to be is always to interbe. Nothing can exist by itself. Let us practice seeing this, just as he taught, by looking deeply at a simple sheet of paper. At first glance, what is a sheet of paper? It is a thin, white object in our hands. But if we look with the eyes of interbeing, we can see a cloud floating in it. We know this because without a cloud, there can be no rain. Without rain, the trees cannot grow. And without trees, we cannot make paper. So the cloud is an essential part of this sheet of paper. If we were to send the cloud back to the sky, the sheet of paper could not exist. The cloud and the paper inter-are. Now, let's look again. We can see the sunshine. The sunshine is also in the paper. The forest cannot grow without sunlight, the energy that allows for photosynthesis. So, the sunshine is here. If we were to send the sunshine back to the sun, the paper would cease to be. The sun and the paper inter-are. And if we continue to look, we can see the logger who cut down the tree. We can see his hands, his sweat. We can see the wheat in the bread he ate for his breakfast that morning, which was also grown with sunshine and rain. We can see his parents, and their parents before them, because without them, he would not be here to cut the tree. Their lives are in this sheet of paper. And we can see the truck driver who brought the log to the mill, the people who operated the machinery, the one who sold the paper to the store. Their skill and effort are all here. And what about us? Our consciousness is also here, perceiving the paper, without our mind, without our eyes. For us, this is not a sheet of paper, so our own mind and the paper inter-are. If we look deeply enough, we can see the entire cosmos in this one simple sheet of paper. It is empty of one single, separate thing called paper, but it is full of the sunshine, the cloud, the forest, the logger, the baker, and the whole universe. This insight of interbeing completely shatters the illusion of a separate self. When we look at our own hand, we can practice in the same way. This hand is not just my hand. In it, I can see my parents, my grandparents, and all my ancestors. I can see the food I have eaten, which means I can see the farmers, the fields, the sun, and the rain once more. I can see the teachers who taught me, the friends who have supported me, the air I am breathing at this very moment. My body is a temporary and precious manifestation of the entire cosmos. The line between what is me and what is not me becomes completely blurred and finally dissolves. This is not just a beautiful poem. It is a truth with profound, practical implications for how we live. It becomes the foundation for a deep and natural ethics. If I inter-am with the river, then polluting the river is a direct act of self-harm. If I inter-am with the forest, then destroying the trees is an act of destroying my own lungs. A true understanding of interbeing gives rise to a powerful ecological consciousness, not because of a moral rule, but because of a clear perception of reality. The boundary between self-interest and the interest of all beings collapses. This insight is also the true source of compassion and responsibility. If your suffering and my suffering are interconnected, then my desire for you to be free from suffering is not just an act of charity, it is also for my own benefit. Your peace contributes to my peace. The words I speak and the actions I take do not just affect my own small sphere. They send ripples out across the entire web of interbeing. This fosters a deep sense of care and conscientiousness in all that we do. And finally, when we see how the entire universe, past and present, has conspired to bring this very moment into being, this breath, this cup of tea, this ray of sunlight, profound and effortless gratitude arises in our hearts. We are supported by everything. We are a part of everything. We are never, ever alone. This radical shift in perspective, from seeing ourselves as isolated nouns to experiencing ourselves as interconnected verbs, naturally leads us to a final, fundamental question. If I am not a separate self, then what is the purpose of a life dedicated to accumulating wealth, status, and pleasure for this self? Such a life is seen to be based on a false premise, like a wave in the ocean, trying to hoard all the water for itself. So, if the old purpose of selfish accumulation falls away, what takes its place? What does a meaningful life look like when viewed through the clarifying and unifying lens of interbeing? We have traveled a great distance together, through the landscapes of the mind and the ancient pathways of wisdom. We have looked directly at the nature of our universal discontent. We have traced its origins to the grasping of the mind, and we have seen that a state of profound peace, a cessation of this struggle, is entirely possible. We have walked, step by step, along the eightfold path, exploring the profound truths of impermanence, no self, and the intricate web of interdependence that connects us all. We have cultivated the boundless heart through loving kindness, compassion, and joy, and we have touched upon the great law of cause and effect, the law of karma, which places the power of our future directly into our own hands. And now, after this long and deep exploration, a very practical question arises. How do we bring all of this home? How do we weave these profound, and sometimes abstract, ideas into the very fabric of a modern life? A life filled with digital notifications, traffic jams, financial pressures, and the constant demand for our attention. This is perhaps the most crucial part of the journey, the translation of insight into action, the movement from understanding to living. The path is not meant to be a beautiful theory, admired from a distance. It is meant to be walked, in our very own shoes, on the very ground we stand upon. The first and most important piece of advice is to start small, with a heart full of gentleness toward yourself. There is no need to suddenly decree that you will meditate for 2 hours every day, or to feel that you have failed if you cannot maintain perfect mindfulness from dawn until dusk. Such ambitions, born from a kind of spiritual grasping, often lead to burnout and disappointment. The mind has been running in its habitual patterns for decades, and it will not change overnight. The goal is not a violent revolution, but a gentle, persistent evolution. So, begin with just 5 minutes. 5 minutes a day, perhaps in the morning, before the world rushes in, or at night, after the day's tasks are done. Find a quiet corner in your home. It does not need to be grand. A simple cushion on the floor or a straight-back chair will do. This small space becomes your sanctuary, a signal to your mind that this is a timmy for stillness. And in these 5 minutes, you do something wonderfully simple. You just breathe. You pay attention to the sensation of the breath entering your body, and the sensation of the breath leaving your body. When the mind wanders, as it inevitably will, into thoughts of the past, plans for the future, or judgments about your meditation, you simply notice. Without scolding, without frustration, you gently, kindly guide your attention back to the breath. Each timmy you do this, you are strengthening the muscle of mindfulness. Each return is a small victory of awareness over habit. 5 minutes. That is all. This small, consistent practice is the seed from which the great tree of peace can grow. Once this small island of formal practice is established, you can begin to build bridges of mindfulness into the rest of your day. This is the practice of meditation in action. The wisdom of the Dharma is not confined to the meditation cushion. It is meant to permeate every moment of our lives. You can start with the most mundane of tasks. When you wash the dishes, truly wash the dishes. Feel the warmth of the water on your hands. See the soap bubbles shimmer. Hear the sound of the plates clinking together. When your mind drifts to the argument you had earlier, or the email you need to write. Just notice it and bring your attention back to the feeling of the sponge in your hand. The dishes are not an obstacle to be overcome before you can get to real life. The washing of the dishes is your life in that moment. You can do the same while driving. Instead of letting frustration build in a traffic jam, use it as an opportunity. Feel the weight of your hands on the steering wheel. Notice the colors of the cars around you. Hear the low hum of your engine. When the feeling of impatience arises, just watch it. See it as a cloud passing through the vast sky of your awareness. You don't have to believe it. You don't have to act on it. You can just let it be. This practice transforms dead Timmy, wasted Timmy, into moments of living meditation. Listening to a friend or a colleague becomes an act of mindfulness. Instead of formulating your response while they are speaking, you can offer them the gift of your full, non-judgmental attention. You listen not just to their words, but to the feeling behind the words. In doing so, you connect with them on a much deeper level, and you find that your own mind becomes more spacious and calm. Every daily routine, from brushing your teeth to walking to your car, can become an anchor for the present moment. Furthermore, we must learn to see the challenges of our daily lives not as punishments or interruptions, but as our greatest teachers. These are the opportunities to put our practice to the test. When you are stuck in that traffic jam and anger begins to boil, this is your chance to practice patience. This is your chance to observe the arising and passing of a powerful emotion without being its slave. When a colleague criticizes your work and your ego feels bruised, this is your laboratory for understanding no-self. You can watch the feeling of I being attacked, you can see the story the mind creates around it, and you can choose not to cling to that story. You can breathe and find a space between the stimulus and your reaction. In that space lies your freedom. When you feel the pull of consumerism, the desire for the next new thing that promises happiness, this is your opportunity to practice contentment and to question the nature of desire itself. Does this truly lead to lasting peace, or is it just another fleeting pleasure that will soon fade? By reframing these difficulties as curriculum, as practice opportunities provided by life itself, we stop being victims of our circumstances and become active students of our own experience. The world is no longer an adversary, it is our monastery. As you walk this path, it is immensely helpful not to walk it alone. In Buddhism, the community of practitioners, known as the Sangha, is considered one of the three jewels, as precious as the Buddha himself and the Dharma, his teachings. Finding a Sangha, whether it is a local meditation group, an online community, or even just one or two spiritual friends, can provide invaluable support. These are the people who understand the journey you are on. You can share your struggles and your small victories without fear of judgment. They can offer encouragement when you feel disheartened and hold you accountable to your intentions. Listening to others' experiences helps you realize that your challenges are not unique, that we are all facing the same fundamental human conditions. This shared understanding fosters a deep sense of connection and reduces the feeling of isolation that is so common in modern society. A good Sangha, guided by kindness and wisdom, acts as a mirror, reflecting both your progress and the areas where you still need to grow. Having friends on the path makes the journey not only easier, but also richer and more joyful. Finally, it is essential to remember the wisdom of the old Zen story. A student asks a great master, "Master, what did you do before you were enlightened?" The master replies, "I chopped wood and I carried water." The student, curious, then asks, "And what do you do now, after you have attained enlightenment?" The master smiles and says, "I chop wood and I carry water." The path of awakening does not necessarily lead to a dramatic change in our external circumstances. We will still have jobs to do, families to care for, bills to pay. We will still chop wood and carry water. The transformation is not external, but internal. It is a change in the quality of our presence, in the state of our mind, as we perform these ordinary tasks. Before, we may have chopped wood with a mind full of resentment and anxiety. Now, we chop wood with full attention, with a sense of peace, with an awareness of the texture of the bark and the weight of the axe. The action is the same, but the experience is completely different. This is the heart of bringing the Dharma home. It is about infusing the ordinary with the extraordinary light of awareness. It is about finding nirvana not in some distant heaven, but in the simple, mindful act of living each moment as it comes. Remember to be patient, be kind to yourself. This is the work of a lifetime. It is a marathon, not a sprint. There will be days of great clarity and days of thick fog. The point is simply to keep walking, to keep returning to the breath, to keep bringing a gentle awareness to your life, one moment at a time. This is how the path is walked, and this is how peace is found, not by escaping our lives, but by entering them more fully than ever before. We have walked a long path together, a journey that began with a quiet recognition of a deep unease, a subtle but persistent hum of dissatisfaction that runs beneath the surface of our busy modern lives. We gave this feeling a name, Dukkha, not as a sentence of doom, but as a brave and honest diagnosis. From there, we traced its origins, not to the world outside, but to the grasping and aversion of our own minds. We discovered the profound and hopeful truth that an end to this struggle is possible, a state of deep peace and clarity called nirvana. And we were given a map, the Noble Eightfold Path, a practical guide to transforming our minds and our lives. Along the way, we explored the powerful tools of mindfulness, the boundless heart of compassion, and the liberating wisdom that sees the impermanent, selfless, and interconnected nature of all things. We have, in essence, journeyed from the acknowledgement of our suffering to the very source of our own liberation. And now, as our journey together comes to a close, we arrive at the single, most vital message. The profound peace, the unshakable contentment that you seek, does not exist in a future accomplishment. It is not waiting for you in a better job, a more perfect relationship, or a larger bank account. It is not hidden in any external circumstance. It has been, and always will be, an inside job. Peace is an inherent quality of the mind, a potential that lies dormant within you, waiting to be cultivated. It is not about creating a life free from problems, challenges, or pain, for such a life is an illusion. True peace, the peace that the Dharma points to, is not the absence of storms, but the discovery of a profound stillness within you that remains untouched, even as the winds howl and the waves crash around you. It is the ability to be the calm, spacious sky that holds all the passing weather of life, without being defined by it. This understanding is the ultimate empowerment. You are not a helpless victim of circumstance, adrift on a chaotic sea. You are the architect of your inner world. You already possess the most fundamental tools you need to begin this construction. Every breath you take is an opportunity to return to the present moment. Every thought that arises is a chance to practice non-judgmental awareness. Every interaction with another person is a chance to cultivate patience and compassion. You do not need to wait for a special time or place to begin. The path is not something you start tomorrow or next year. The path begins now. It begins exactly where you are, in the midst of your beautiful, imperfect life. This entire journey, these words, have been an invitation to look within, to become your own refuge. The path may not always be easy, but it is one of supreme worth, for it leads not to some fantastical reward, but to the simple, profound, and undeniable truth of your own peaceful nature. Begin where you are, with a single mindful breath.